Chapter 1635. Crack. The crack on the egg deepened further. And this was only the remnant power of the chains. Once it hit, the fetus would be broken and the person would die. In the Easter egg, a roar that shook the universe broke out. Tribulation! Immortal! It was the work of a tribulation transcender. It was supposed to bear the weight of the great Tao, but it had become a tribulation of the great Tao. Who among the heroes of the absolute beginning had the ability to change the will of the great Tao? Among all the people Su Yu knew of, there was only one type of person who possessed such a great magical power. Tribulation transcenders. When Su Yu was in the Tao Tai's stomach, they attacked Su Yu whenever he was in danger, putting him in an even more precarious situation. On several occasions, Su Yu was certain to die. If Xia Jingyu hadn't sacrificed herself to resolve the disaster, Su Yu would have been just a speck of dust by now. Now, they once again struck at the moment when Su Yu broke through the shackles and carried the Great Path, attempting to use the hand of the Great Path to erase Su Yu from the world. How could Su Yu not be angry at such a monstrous hatred? How could he be willing to be executed? Tribulation transcender. When have I ever wronged you and made you hunt me down at all costs? Su Yu let out a roar that was surging with rebellious intent. What replied him was that at Heaven Court's gap, a changing cloud gathered into an incomparably massive face. The facial features were clear and lifelike. The giant face's hollow eyes looked down at Su Yu and revealed a mocking smile. Sure enough, some sort of consciousness existed. In the past, it had only been faintly discernible, but now it had truly appeared. Su Yu's anger and defiance converged. How could he do as the tribulation transcender wished? If he died, who in the absolute beginning great world would know that Xia Jingyu was waiting to be resurrected? He could not die. His soul vibrated intensely and buzzed like never before. Divine Nine-Dragon Cauldron, appear. With a shout, the nine-jade spiritual pearl, which had been silent for a long time, emitted a green light. It was the divine Nine-Dragon Cauldron. It had occupied Su Yu's soul from the very beginning, and it was the only one whose soul was connected to Su Yu. The divine Nine-Dragon Cauldron sensed Su Yu's intense soul fluctuations and hurriedly protected him. Roar, 5 dragon roars that pierced through heaven and earth and resounded through time and space came from the nine-jade spiritual pearl. 5 dragons of different colors broke through the seal of the nine-jade spiritual pearl and forcibly flew out. The moment the chains of the Great Path arrived, the 5 flying dragons intertwined into one, transforming into a 5-colored divine dragon. Roar, Emoda roared wildly, and the blood-red chains actually slowed down a little. At the same time, the 5-colored divine dragon whipped its tail, and a wave of time, space, soul, life, and death laws descended without any warning. As the dragon's tail lashed out, 5 types of extremely mysterious laws slammed into the chain, slowing it down even more. However, the chain was still too close to Su Yu. It looked like it was about to smash the egg into pieces. At this moment, the 5-colored divine dragon used its body to block the chains. With a loud wail, the 5-colored divine dragon's body contorted from the whipping. The dragon's body was shattered, and half of its head was severed. Su Yu's soul was connected to the divine Nine-Dragon Cauldron. He could feel the extreme pain of the 5 divine dragons at this moment. They were bearing the crushing pressure from the great way of absolute beginning. At the end of the day, the 5 divine dragons were an amalgamation of the 5 types of laws. The tragic consequences of colliding with the great way of absolute beginning, the mother of all laws, could be imagined. Their bodies were crushed little by little, torn apart from the inside out by the great way of absolute beginning. However, the 5 divine dragons did not retreat. Instead, they endured the endless pain and burst out with incomparably bright colorful light from the inside out. An incomparably powerful law gushed out from the 5-colored divine dragon. The body of the 5-colored divine dragon suddenly expanded, like a ball that was about to explode. Boom! Without waiting for Su Yu to stop it, the five-colored divine dragon exploded. The five-colored light formed an umbrella shape, protecting the egg below. The power of the rule that erupted surged into the sky, forcibly pushing away the chains of the great path. Life and death were only a hair's breadth apart. However, the price was the self-destruction of the five-colored divine dragon. The great way of absolute beginning descended twice and returned without any success. It slowly retreated into the huge gap in the sky. The faintly discernible tribulation intent gradually dissipated. The mocking giant face stopped mocking and revealed a sullen expression. In the darkness there was a cold snort. With unwillingness, the giant face slowly dissipated. Crack, at this time, the egg below, bearing the bombardment of the great path rules twice, finally succeeded in igniting the divine flame. It cracked open on its own, revealing a nine-colored person in the form of a human. In the gap in the sky, the blood-red chain flickered, and the mark of an oil lamp flew down and floated on the chest of the human. Suddenly the world trembled. All the cave world venerables, all the strong mortal fairies, even the star pavilion master, the sword pavilion master, and those powerful existences like the peak masters, their divine Laksana all appeared involuntarily and knelt in the direction of the nine-colored person. It was as if it was the king of many divine paths, the god of all gods. This strange and shocking phenomenon did not stop at the double star island, but swept across the sea of constellations at an incredible speed. Countless sea areas similar to the sword pavilion erupted with a powerful overlord aura. They stood at the peak of the sky, staring at the uncontrollable divine Laksana in shock. In the sea of constellations, three majestic existences exuding the power of the ancient times were awakened from their eternal slumber. They were the three great emperors of the sea of constellations. They were legendary existences. No one had seen them for tens of thousands of years. There were rumors that they might have already traveled overseas, and there were also rumors that they had already passed away. However, the three great powers that shook the sea of constellations announced their existence. The three emperors did not leave, but there was no longer anything in the sea of constellations that could attract them, except for the divine Laksana that was acting strangely. Somewhere in the sea of constellations, there was a round purple bamboo that reached the endless sky and reached the bottom of the sea of constellations, like a pillar that supported the heavens. Purple bamboo leaves grew luxuriantly, numbering in the tens of millions. And every bamboo leaf was incomparably huge, only bigger than the double star island. Above it was an endless land, an endless number of cities, all kinds of forces, and all kinds of different races lived here. In terms of prosperity, even the central island of the sword pavilion seas could not compare. One bamboo leaf was an extremely prosperous island, and there were as many as 10 million bamboo leaves on the purple bamboo. In the sea of constellations there were only 3 places that could have such a magnificent aura. This was the residence of one of the 3 emperors in the sea of constellations, the Purple Flower Pavilion. It was a legendary divine bamboo that was born in ancient times, the divine bamboo of creation. In the depths of the Purple Flower Pavilion, a beautiful woman in a long purple dress was sleeping on her side. Around her body were materialized chains, and there were as many as 99 of them. Suddenly, she opened her eyes. There were no pupils in her eyes, but a miraculous scene was playing out. A gorgeous white flower bloomed, withered, fell, was born again, and bloomed again, repeating the cycle. It was as if time and space were passing in her eyes. The chains around her body swayed gently, as if they had sensed something unusual. She slowly got up. It was a normal movement, but it gave off a feeling that she was in harmony with the great Tao of heaven and earth, as if she was the great Tao itself, making people feel extremely comfortable. Through the divine bamboo, the withered eyes of the white flower saw the chaotic scene in the outside world. Mortal fairies, cave world venerables and overlords, their divine Laksana appeared involuntarily, and they all knelt in the same direction. She was slightly startled, and immediately, the scene of the withered white flower in her eyes was annihilated in an instant. A pair of purple pupils emerged. The 10,000 gods greet the sect. This is. Her purple pupils showed a hint of surprise and disbelief, and she said softly and affirmatively, "This is the descent of the path god." She left the divine bamboo in an instant and looked into the endless distance. That is the border of the purple flower pavilion, not where the sacred mountain is. So, is it the birth of the sacred body of mortal fetus? Her eyes were shining brightly. The sacred body of mortal fetus appears once in a billion years, but the last time it appeared was 30 years ago. Was it an illusion? Why did two sacred bodies of mortal fetus appear one after another? She stared into the distance for a long time, leaving behind a scattered shadow, and disappeared without a trace. Above the double-star island of the Sword Pavilion, Suyu, who had broken through the shackles, stood in the sky. He did not feel the thrill of the breakthrough, but stared at the giant face that was gradually dissipating. Again and again, did the Calamity Fairy think that Suyu was a lowly ant who could not resist? Only they could punish Suyu, but Suyu could not reach or touch them. He thought back to Xiaojingyu, who had sacrificed his eyes and his heart, until only a wisp of hair was left. Suyu's eyes were filled with monstrous hatred. "As you wish, I have come to the great beginning realm. Can you still hide in the darkness and wait for disaster to befall you?" Suyu clenched his 5 fingers, and a 9-colored power of the myriad path god was grasped in his palm. Solid chains of the rules were born out of thin air. This scene shocked the eyes of all living beings. Mu Songhai was extremely excited. This is the unique power of the path gods, the power of Tao. It is rumored that the path gods can create rules out of thin air. Overlords could only touch the rules, and only the divine warriors of heaven and earth could use the rules. And the path gods could directly create the rules. The red oil lamp mark on Suyu's chest emitted a faint light, and a trace of the power of Tao entered Suyu's body. It was this mark that allowed Suyu to master the power of creating the rules. Time, space, soul, life, and death, 5 thumb-sized chains were created out of thin air. They danced like snakes in Suyu's palm. "The mark of the rules," Suyu shouted coldly. He clenched his 5 fingers, and the 5 thumb-sized chains merged into the shape of a 5-colored divine dragon. The 5-colored divine dragon, the size of an index finger, soared into the sky and disappeared into the giant face that was about to disappear. Suddenly, the giant face showed a look of anger, as if it had been provoked by an ant. On the forehead of the giant face, a mark of the 5-colored divine dragon appeared. No matter how the giant face twisted, the 5-colored divine dragon mark did not fall off at all. It disappeared together with the giant face. Suyu's eyes were like lightning, and he suddenly turned and shot to the north. The mark appeared in the extreme north. The 5-colored divine dragon mark was imprinted on the body of the tribulation fairy through the giant face. Because of this, the giant face showed a look of anger. This mark was created by Suyu, and it had his own scent. No matter how far away it was, Suyu could feel it. Chapter 1636. What you have done to me and to Xiaojingyu, I, Suyu, am here to pay you back, Suyu said coldly. Swoosh. 2 sonic booms rang out as Mu Songhai and Jian Ruxiong rushed over. Their faces were filled with reverence. Suyu glanced at them and uttered the word, escape, indifferently. In an instant, the way of escape emerged around him. He disappeared into thin air. Mu Songhai and Jian Ruxiong looked to the north and were about to chase after him when Suyu's breath suddenly disappeared. The two of them stopped in their tracks. Mu Songhai sighed deeply. As expected of a path god, you can use all kinds of divine paths freely. You must have used the way of concealment at this moment. Jian Ruxiong was unwilling to give up. He held his sword and prepared to search for Suyu. Path god, a strange spirit of heaven and earth that appears once in a billion years. If they could imprison him, no, even if they could befriend him, the benefits would be endless. Sword Master, I think you'd better take care of yourself first. Mu Songhai's cold voice came from behind. The birth of the mortal divine body was just an interlude. She would not forget the purpose of this trip. Jian Ruxiong stopped in his tracks. He was annoyed but helpless. He could only look for Shuiyu first. He looked in the direction where Su Yu disappeared with great reluctance. He gritted his teeth and turned to leave. At the same time, on the central island where Jian Xian was, in the long-closed cave of 10,000 dragons, there was a creature at this moment. His whole body exuded an extremely fierce aura. He was lying in a pile of dragon bones, gnawing on them. This place is a godsend for me. The creature chewed on the dragon bones and laughed excitedly. So many ancient divine dragon remains are enough for me to evolve. By then, even the Star River Overlord will not be a match for me, Gu Taishu. As he laughed, a hideous smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Su Yu, you must have never imagined that I, Gu Taishu, would end up like this, right? If you were still alive, I wonder if you would be surprised. Su Yu, who had taken a step into the air, swept away the traces behind him and landed on an uninhabited island. He could not calm down. It was not because he had a narrow escape, nor was it because he was a path god, but he raised his finger, and a strand of hair circled around his index finger, fluttering gently in the sea breeze. Jingyu, you must be lonely all by yourself, right? As Su Yu stroked her hair, his eyes were filled with a gentle light. It was as if he was protecting the most precious treasure in his life. After returning to the Zhenlong continent, Xia Jingyu traveled alone. Perhaps she had already foreseen the existence of the Tribulation Fairy, and had foreseen that Su Yu's life was unpredictable. Therefore, he had been searching for a way out for Su Yu all alone. Those years must have been lonely, right? The corners of Su Yu's mouth were filled with nostalgia and love as he sat down cross-legged. He looked at the 9-jade spiritual pearl and said, "Strip." A wave of the divine Tao descended and enveloped the 9-jade spirit pearl, destroying the initial refinement mark. The 9-jade spiritual pearl immediately became an ownerless object. Shortly after, Su Yu clenched his fist and created a chain seal, which landed on the 9-jade spiritual pearl. It's a brand forged by my rules. In this world, apart from me, there shouldn't be anyone else who can activate it, Su Yu murmured. In other words, even if this item was lost, no one would be able to break the seal of refinement. After refining the 9-jade spiritual pearl again, Su Yu's mind moved, and a speck of dust flew out and fell into Su Yu's palm. The speck of dust seemed ordinary, but in fact it was the cavern world. Back then, Demon Sword Wuya used the sword that he had comprehended to cut the sinful girl. Su Yu then stored the drop of divine blood in this cavern world. When he opened the cavern world, there was no blood in the empty world. Instead, there was a graceful, slender, and beautiful figure. Her face was covered by a mysterious mass of air, but that figure, that familiar breath, who else could it be other than the sinful girl? Su Yu was a little surprised at first, and then he sighed softly. The strength of the Path Master is incredible. A drop of blood can also transform into the form of the original body, and also has the cultivation of the Bronze Overlord. The sinful girl looked at him calmly, and her temperament was the same as the original body. She looked at Su Yu like a fairy who did not eat the food of the world, and said lightly, "You are not bad, too. In just a year, you achieved the top of the 8,000 divine paths to 10,000 divine paths, and became a path god. No wonder you are the descendant of the ancient god Jiolong, and you have the holy mortal body, just like him in the past." Su Yu was a little surprised. Did the ancient god Jiolong also have the holy mortal body? Staring at the sinful girl, Su Yu sighed. You even have the memory of the sinful girl? It is hard to believe that you are just a drop of essence blood. The sinful girl said lightly, Why did you try so hard to get me? Su Yu did not respond, but said, If you are willing to surrender, I can reluctantly answer you. Shaking her head, the sinful girl said, It is useless. I have contacted the sinful girl palace, and I believe that soon, the sinful girl will find you. At that time, you and your master Yun Yazi will not escape death. That is not your concern, Su Yu said indifferently, and his expression was firm. Binding path. A binding divine path descended, turned into a chain, and entangled the sinful girl. Unexpectedly, the sinful girl did not resist, but just looked at Su Yu quietly. Su Yu was not surprised, and took her out of the cavern world. He held the sinful girl in his left hand, and a strand of Xia Jingyu's black hair was entwined in his right hand. According to Yun Yazi, the reason that resurrection was ineffective on Xia Jingyu was that she died in a disaster, and her death was affected by the fate law. Unless Su Yu could control the path of fate in the divine nine-dragon cauldron, he could not save her. There was only one way to water the divine dragon that represented fate. Watering it with the blood of the Path Master. Therefore, Su Yu had tried so hard to get a drop of the Path Master's blood. Taking a deep breath, Su Yu took out the divine nine-dragon cauldron from the nine-jade spiritual pearl. The 5 divine dragons were like crystals, vivid and lifelike. The other 4 were dull and lifeless. Su Yu stared at the blue divine dragon among them. That dragon represented a supreme law, fate. The so-called fate was as elusive as a swan. It seemed empty, but it really existed. Although there were many divine paths in the world, only a few could comprehend fate. Even with the divine nine-dragon cauldron, Su Yu had not been able to comprehend the dragon of fate since he comprehended the death divine path. Now, with the help of the Path Master's blood, he could give it a try. The dragon of fate. The sinful lady looked at the divine nine-dragon cauldron with a calm expression. So, you want to use me to water the divine nine-dragon cauldron to comprehend the path of fate. I see. Su Yu stared at her. So, have you decided to resist? The sinful lady shook her head lightly. No. I am no match for you. Resistance is meaningless. Besides, you will be captured and brought back to the sinful lady palace soon. I don't have to struggle much. She was extraordinarily rational. However, you have mastered the path of fate. Is it for the owner of this hair? The sinful lady looked at Su Yu's index finger again, and said with pity, Perhaps you don't even know who you are resurrecting and who she is. Her words implied that not only did she know Xia Jingyu, but she also knew that her identity was very special. Su Yu did not ask, even though he wanted to know who Xia Jingyu was. But somehow, he had a feeling that it was better not to know. It was better for both him and Xia Jingyu. You are much more talkative than I am, Su Yu said lightly. The sinful lady smiled faintly. Her body gradually disappeared, leaving only a drop of liquid condensed from the great path chain. That was the blood of the Path Master. Su Yu took a deep breath and dripped the blood of the Path Master onto the dragon of fate. All of a sudden, the dragon of fate, which had never moved before, let out a loud dragon roar. As the blood of the Path Master flowed through, 1/3 of the dragon's body turned into a sky-blue crystal. The whole divine nine-dragon cauldron suddenly rotated on its own and trembled violently, as if it was cheering and excited. When the blood of the Path Master ran out, the dragon of fate seemed to come back to life. A beam of blue light shot out from the dragon's eyes and entered Su Yu's soul. In an instant, a strange message appeared in his soul. The Sword of Fate. Su Yu murmured, his eyes brightening. Like other divine dragons, after the dragon of fate was crystallized, Su Yu obtained the corresponding special divine path, the Sword of Fate. With a shift of his mind, a sky-blue virtual shadow of a small sword appeared in his palm. It was only 3 inches long. Its only function was to cut off fate. For example, to cut off the fate that was entangled with Xia Jingyu. I've finally succeeded. Su Yu's palm was trembling slightly, and his eyes were slightly moist. After spending so much effort and waiting for such a long time, he had finally reached this step. Suyu raised his right hand and stared at the strand of green hair, his heart trembling continuously. Fate begins under the pear tree, fate ends at the end of the divine realm. Suyu murmured, "Let me resume the fate that was broken between us." Resurrection from the dead. Suyu clenched his right fist, and an incomparably strong life force surged out from his chest. The emerald green light wrapped around the strand of green hair, and a magnificent, wonderful, mighty force descended. On the surface of the strand of green hair, there were a few lines that could not be seen before. There were a total of 4 lines. They bound and bound the strand of green hair, making it impossible to resurrect it. Suyu raised the sword of fate and slashed at them one by one. The 4 lines of fate were cut off easily like ordinary silk threads, peeling off and turning into nothingness. The binding of fate was gone, and the strand of green hair turned from 10 to 11, from 11 to 12, from 12 to 13. Suyu counted without blinking, his heart thumping wildly, as if he was protecting a weak flame, until the smooth strand of green hair draped over his shoulder. The end of the strand of green hair began to form a skin sac. Within the skin sac, meridians were formed, and outside the meridians, flesh and blood were formed. Xia Jingyu's breath appeared bit by bit as her body was being reconstructed. At this moment, Suyu's eyes were moist. It was her, it was Xia Jingyu. The eyes, the heart, and the body that she had sacrificed for Suyu were all being restored one by one. His right arm gradually became heavier, giving Suyu a sense of security that he had never felt before. The great remorse in his heart had been alleviated at this moment. "Jingyu, let's go back to Xunyue Island together. Let's go back to the pear tree and finish teaching the unfinished divine decree, okay?" Suyu stared at the person in his arms, who was gradually becoming plump. It was as if they had returned to the beginning. Under the moonlight, amidst the garden full of pear blossoms, Xia Jingyu was lying in his arms, enjoying the ethereal divine decree in peace. Xia Jingyu was lying in the crook of his arm in the emerald light. Her life force was gradually weakening, a sign that her resurrection was about to be completed. On the contrary, Xia Jingyu's life force was getting stronger, and her soul aura was getting stronger. "Jingyu, we have finally reunited." Suyu let out a long sigh, his heart filled with a deep sense of vicissitudes. It was as if they had not been separated for 20 years, but for several eras. Suyu stared at the person in his arms, watching Xia Jingyu return from the emerald light with his own eyes. Bit by bit, drop by drop, Xia Jingyu gradually became clearer. However, Suyu's expression changed from surprise to doubt, then to shock, and finally to stupefaction. The person in his arms slowly opened her eyes, which were bright and pure, as if she had never been tainted by the world. Those were the eyes of a child. She looked at Suyu, blinked her eyes, and said, "Uncle, who are you?" Not receiving a response, she jumped out of Suyu's arms in fear. Her body was small and her face was young. She looked less than 10 years old. Chapter 1637. Her facial features vaguely had the charm of Xia Jingyu, especially that pair of bright eyes. Apart from being innocent and pure, they were exactly the same as Xia Jingyu's. How did this happen? Suyu's mind went blank. Based on Suyu's experience in resurrecting others, he had always been resurrected until the moment before his death. Only Xia Jingyu looked the same as when she was 10 years old. 10 years old. When he was 10 years old, he had never met Xia Jingyu. Both of their lives did not have each other. "Uncle, who are you?" Xia Jingyu's small and weak body shivered in the cold wind. Her pure and bright eyes looked at Suyu with fear and curiosity. "Uncle?" Suyu felt as if something had been broken. It rolled across his cheeks and turned into a desolate smile. His lover under the pear blossoms under the moonlight, the tearful farewell at Xunyue Island, the vow to see the world on his behalf, one scene after another, like mottled leaves shredded by the autumn wind, fluttering and falling into the frosty morning. A great sorrow lingered in his heart. White clouds drifted leisurely, and time and space were quiet. The world was vast, but Su-yu seemed to be the only one left, walking alone in the lost wilderness. Jing-yu, Su-yu muttered as he took out a black book. The 4 words, starry sky, heavenly tome, were worn away by time. His fingers gently brushed past it. He was clearly touching the thing he loved the most, but every inch he touched felt like he was being cut by a knife. The pain spread to the deepest part of his soul. The black book opened on its own. A fluorescent light shot out from the book and interweaved in the void to form a scroll, moving like a projection. In the picture was Xia Jingyu, her beautiful figure. The projection continued, replaying every detail of Xia Jingyu's life. Every place she walked, every object she saw, was recorded in detail. Picturesque mountains and rivers, bustling with people, all kinds of martial arts, all kinds of strange people, from the Azure Sea to the Empire of Darkness branch, from the branch to the headquarters for the Great Sage Examination, from carrying out many missions to reading all kinds of martial arts in the world. She recorded everything she saw in the starry sky heavenly tome without missing a single detail. It was as if she was reading the world for someone else. That was the promise she had made to Su-yu. She replaced Su-yu's eyes to see the prosperity of the Zhenlong continent. She never forgot her promise. She used the starry sky heavenly tome to engrave the world she saw. The scene continued until the end, when Xia Jingyu held the heavenly book in her hands and sat alone on the stairs, staring blankly into the distance. Xia Jingyu wore a faint smile at the corners of her mouth, and it seemed like she was able to see Su-yu's current state through the scene. She looked at Su-yu's eyes, which were filled with tenderness, and said, "Brother Su-yu, when you see this, I won't be here anymore. I don't know how long I accompanied Brother Su-yu before I left, and I don't know whether I was happy when I left. It's a pity that I can't see the future, and I can only hope that I left in Brother Su-yu's arms." At this point, Xia Jingyu's snow-white face blushed. She was delicate and beautiful, like a red lotus in the wind. Xia Jingyu bit her rosy lips, then gathered her courage and shyly looked into Su-yu's eyes. "Brother Su-yu, I don't know whether I told you about my feelings for you before I left. Actually, I like you, and I have always liked you. My words must have scared Brother Su-yu, right?" Xia Jingyu's face was filled with regret. "Am I being too selfish? I clearly know that Brother Su-yu has Xian, yet I still troubled him." After she thought about it for a moment, Xia Jingyu shook her head and forced a smile. "Anyway, I'm already gone, so you don't need to worry about it." Her smile was filled with loneliness. "Okay, Brother Su-yu, goodbye. These might be my last words to you. If you know that I'm dead, don't be sad. My world has been wonderful because of you, and I'm satisfied with it. I don't have any regrets." Xia Jingyu stood up with a smile in her bright eyes, and her black hair fluttered in the wind. "Finally, I wish that you and Xian will grow old together, and forgive me for not being able to attend your wedding. Goodbye, my most beloved Brother Su-yu." As the last wisp of her voice faded away, the starry sky heavenly book's light dimmed, and it closed by itself. It then floated into Su-yu's palm. Her words were still ringing in his ears, as they were the contents of the starry sky heavenly book before Xia Jingyu's death, when the Zhenlong continent had been destroyed. They were also the last words that Su-yu would ever hear from Xia Jingyu. Who would have thought that things would change with the passage of time? His last words would become the ending song between them. 2 streams of hot tears rolled down Su-yu's cheeks. Everything had come to an end. He hadn't had the time to respond to her confession, hadn't had the time to give her the future she deserved, and hadn't had the time to tell her that his world had also been wonderful because of her. He still owed her a thank you, but there were no buts. Su-yu lowered his head, and all his hopes were dashed. There was nothing sadder than a dead heart. To Su-yu, this was the most vivid description. The world was silent and time was silent. Su-yu fell into a boundless loneliness. "Uncle." The 10-year-old girl walked over and stretched out her slender fingers to wipe away the tears on Su-yu's cheeks. Su-yu raised his head, and the girl's figure was reflected in his dim pupils. A wisp of killing intent and a wisp of crazy thoughts were growing in his heart. If he killed her and tried to revive her again, would it bring Xia Jingyu back to life? The girl shivered in fear, and her bright eyes were filled with tears. She shivered as she asked, "Uncle, do you want to kill me?" Su-yu was indifferent, and the coldness in his eyes became deeper and deeper. The girl shivered, but she bit her lips and didn't flinch. She cried, "I don't know why Uncle wants to kill me, but I'm willing to let you kill me. It's as if I've already prepared to die for you, like a fallen leaf, and willingly enter the raging fire." Boom! Thousands of thunders exploded in Su-yu's mind. The twisted killing intent in his heart receded like a tide. His dim eyes focused again, and he fixed his gaze on the girl in front of him. "You said you're willing to die for me?" Su-yu looked at her, and his chest was beating rapidly. At this moment, Su-yu felt like he was facing Xia Jingyu as he faced the 10-year-old girl. The girl replied in a daze, "Yes." She stared at Su-yu's face, stretched out her tender little hand, and wiped away the tears on Su-yu's cheeks. She said softly, "I don't know why, but it seems like we've met before. It was vaguely under a pear-blossom moon. Uncle, have we really met before?" Su-yu's heart was in turmoil. No. The girl in front of him wasn't the 10-year-old Xia Jingyu. At that time, Xia Jingyu didn't know the pear-blossom moon. "Don't move." Su-yu seemed to have grasped the last ray of hope. He operated the path of destiny and glanced at the girl's body again. Finally, he fixed his gaze on her forehead. 4 traces, which were invisible to the naked eye, came into view. Those were the traces left behind by the destiny. The 4 destinies that hindered her resurrection were indeed cut off, but the traces they left behind were still there. It was these 4 traces that hindered Xia Jingyu's resurrection. Xia Jingyu's body and soul were only partially restored. According to common sense, when it came to resurrection, either the resurrection failed or the resurrection succeeded. However, Xia Jingyu was extremely special. She should have failed her resurrection and turned into a fluorescent life force that dissipated. Instead, she miraculously became a semi-successful product, the 10-year-old Xia Jingyu. Her body and soul were only partially restored. Everything in the world has its cause and effect. Everything is reincarnation. After mastering the path of destiny, Su-yu had some superficial understanding of destiny. Whoever started the trouble must untie it. The 4 traces of destiny were left by the Tribulation Fairy, and they were also left by the Tribulation Fairy, Su-yu said. After resolving the 4 traces of destiny, Xia Jingyu would recover on her own. The method was to find the Tribulation Fairy and kill him. He would kill whoever caused the calamity. Su-yu's eyes were fixed on the extreme north, and he said coldly, "Tribulation Fairy, it's time to settle the score with you. Uncle, just do it." The little girl closed her eyes and said bravely. She seemed to be fearless, but her long eyelashes fluttered gently, and her little hands were clenched tightly, showing the panic and fear in her heart. Su-yu was apologetic. He was ashamed of his twisted killing intent just now. He had always adhered to his principles and would never kill the innocent, but just now, gently touching her head, Su-yu squatted down and said softly, "I'm sorry for letting you see my ugly side. Can you forgive me?" The little girl opened her eyes and asked curiously, "You won't kill me?" Su-yu nodded. The little girl immediately hid her worry and smiled faintly. Then, she used her right index finger to play with her long black hair. Her subtle movement warmed Su-yu's heart even more. Using her index finger to play with her hair was Xia Jingyu's habit. "Are you willing to go with me?" Su-yu asked. The little girl nodded without hesitation. "Yes, I am. Aren't you afraid of me?" Su-yu asked again. The little girl shook her head. "I'm not afraid. I believe whatever you say. It's her." Su-yu's heart warmed even more. Holding her little hand, he strode towards the north. Their little conversation echoed in the sky. Do you remember what your name is? Yes, Xia Jingyu. Wrong, it's Little Jingyu. Oh, then my name is Little Jingyu. 5 days passed in the blink of an eye. Little Jingyu looked at the huge island below curiously. A stone sword that pierced through the sky stood majestically in the center of the island. Uncle, why did you bring me here? She asked. Suyu said, Before I leave, I have to deal with some people and some matters. He took a step forward, and the shadow of the chain of law flashed by. In the sword pavilion, 2 of the 10 peaks were already stained with blood. It was bloody and glaring. The peaks had collapsed. It was obvious that they had been killed by some kind of powerful force. All the people on the peaks, regardless of whether they were strong or weak, had been slaughtered. Star Cabinet Master, don't you dare go too far. Jian Ruxiong's angry roar came from a splendid sword-shaped palace surrounded by the 10 peaks. Opposite him was Mu Songhai, who was sitting calmly. Wisps of fierce divine energy remained on his fingertips. Mu Songhai said indifferently, The 3-day period has passed. According to my warning, if Shui Yu is not found, I will slaughter the whole sword pavilion. Now I have changed it to a day and slaughtered a peak. I am already being exceptionally merciful to you. Jian Ruxiong was filled with grief and anger. Including the 8 peak masters who had been killed before, 3 peak masters had been killed. Ever since the sword pavilion was founded, it had never suffered such a loss. Chapter 1638. You didn't. Mu Songhai shook his head, not feeling that he had gone too far. As for the members of the sword pavilion who were implicated and killed, he did not feel the slightest bit of sympathy for them. The notorious reputation of the Sword Tower was not only because of the evil deeds of the Peak Lords, but also because the disciples were mostly people who had killed countless people. Mu Songhai showed no mercy in killing them. Jian Ruxiong was speechless. He thought that he could retrieve the Royal Scepter Dragon Sovereign Sword, and that he no longer had to fear the Star Pavilion. That was why he was so daring. Who would have thought that things would turn out contrary to his wishes, and he would end up in such a passive position? But Shui Yu's whereabouts are unknown. It's impossible to find him. Jian Ruxiong was extremely regretful. If he had known that Suyu was so difficult to deal with, why would he have acted with such great fanfare? Are you trying to say that Shui Yu's whereabouts are unknown, and it has nothing to do with you? Mu Songhai's expression gradually turned cold. Jian Ruxiong clenched his fists and said hatefully, Is his life worth the lives of tens of thousands of our disciples? Star Pavilion Master, don't push us too far. Mu Songhai's eyes were slightly cold. An incomparably tyrannical aura gushed out and swept the surroundings. He coldly said, The one who forced our Star Pavilion into a corner is you. Do you know what kind of order the headquarters of the Star Pavilion has given? Thump. Jian Ruxiong had an extremely bad premonition. He was originally puzzled. Mu Songhai should have been busy with something very important, and it was impossible for him to leave. So why did he personally leave? There really was a hidden story behind this. Mu Songhai took out a bone-chilling ancient profound ice stone. Mystic ice was not rare. At the very least, it was extremely common in the Sea of Constellations. However, the profound ice stone was an ancient divine stone that could only be condensed from profound ice after billions of years. Its preciousness was not inferior to an emperor-level divine weapon. However, Mu Songhai casually shot out one. As the Star Pavilion Master, it was not strange for him to have profound ice stones. However, what if that mysterious ice rock was only an invitation? Jian Ruxiong looked at the item, and his angry face was replaced by respect. An invitation letter from the Snow Sea of the northern region. Is it the invitation letter from the ancient dream altar? His eyes were burning with desire, greed, and regret. The ancient dream altar was located in the ancient spiritual grounds of the Snow Dragon Sovereign, one of the three great sovereigns of the Sea of Constellations. It was rumored that the altar was left behind by an ancient Tao master. The altar was filled with Daolord's miracles. Comprehending for a day here was better than 1,000 years in the outside world. Back then, the Snow Dragon Sovereign was just an ordinary overlord-level powerhouse. There were many more talented individuals in the Sea of Constellations than him. However, he was the only one who had broken through to the martial Emperor realm because of the ancient dream altar. He was chased by someone and fell into a desperate situation, accidentally falling off the altar. After comprehending for 300 years, he came out of seclusion. His body was filled with the desolate power of an emperor, shocking the heroes of the world. The enemies that chased after him in the past had been cleanly slaughtered by the Snow Dragon Emperor, not a single one remaining. Not only that, but he had also broken the Sea of Constellations subjugation crusade between the two great sovereigns, becoming the third sovereign on par with them. Since then, the ancient dream altar had become a holy land that countless people yearned for. Even the other two emperors had the intention to explore this place. Unfortunately, the Snow Dragon Emperor had used his unique power to seal this place. Unless he opened it, no one could enter. Only in this way could he sever the delusions of the heroes of the world. But what was strange was that the Snow Dragon Emperor did not completely block off the path. Instead, he promised to open it once every 300 years. As long as one was invited, they were qualified. Every 300 years, those who were qualified would receive an invitation to the ancient dream altar. The Star Pavilion was undoubtedly the most qualified one. And the seemingly powerful Jian Xian had no value in the eyes of the Snow Dragon Emperor. Naturally, there was no point in inviting him. The Star Pavilion headquarters received 10 invitations. My Jian Xian Sea Region's Star Pavilion branch is relatively weak among the many branches. Originally, we were not qualified. Mu Songhai's killing intent became colder, but, after the headquarters received the information of Master Shui, they made an exception and gave me an invitation. Jian Ruxiong, why don't you tell me? If I report to the headquarters that Master Shui has met with misfortune, are you more unlucky or am I? The answer was obvious, they were both unlucky. Jian Ruxiong broke out in cold sweat. The Star Pavilion headquarters was a huge entity that spanned across the Sea of Constellations and even the other seas. In terms of power, even the three emperors were wary of it. If the Star Pavilion headquarters were to vent their anger, Mu Songhai would not be able to escape punishment. Jian Ruxiong's fate would be even more miserable. At that time, it would not only be the Jian Xian that was slaughtered. Pavilion Master, Shui Yu's whereabouts are unknown. I really can't hand him over. If there is a way to make up for it, I am willing to use anything to make up for it. I only hope that it can extinguish the anger of the Star Pavilion headquarters. Jian Ruxiong was extremely regretful. Now, even if Shui Yu took away the revered dragon sword in front of him, he would have to think twice before killing him. Mu Songhai sneered. Make up for it? You can say that to the headquarters. There is no need for the headquarters. Just make it up to me. Shui Yu's voice came into their ears without warning. The two were shocked. They had set up an overlord-level soundproofing technique. Who could easily listen in on their conversation. More importantly, the other party's voice could still be heard. But immediately realizing that it was Shui Yu's voice, the two were relieved. They felt unprecedentedly relaxed. Swoosh, the two teleported and came to the outside world. They saw a handsome young man standing on the symbol of the Jian Xian, the stone sword. Who else could it be but Shui Yu? The two heaved a sigh of relief. Jian Ruxiong felt like he had just passed by the gates of hell. Fortunately, Shui Yu was not in trouble. What surprised the two was that Su Yu was holding a girl who was as beautiful as a little fairy. Of course, they quickly ignored her. Mu Songhai was overjoyed. He stepped forward and said, Master Shui, you worried me to death. Fortunately, you are fine. Su Yu waved his hand. I was lucky to survive. Hearing that, Mu Songhai stared at Jian Ruxiong coldly. Hints of danger flickered in the depths of his eyes. Master Shui, who chased after you? If you can point them out, I will kill them all. Mu Songhai was a little afraid. These idiots had almost implicated him. Su Yu shook his head. No need, they did not cause me any substantial harm. He looked at the two destroyed peaks. One of them was the peak of the Green Shadow Overlord. Among them, he was the one who had chased after Su Yu the most. He had come here to settle the score with him. However, it seemed that there was no need to settle the score. Mu Songhai had inadvertently wiped him off the face of the earth. If that's the case, Mu Songhai was relieved. If it was not necessary, she did not want to force Jian Ruxiong into a corner. If they really fought, she was confident that she could win, but it was impossible for her to come out unscathed. However, there is one person that needs to be dealt with, Cabinet Master, Su Yu said. Mu Songhai's heart tightened. Who? The person who tipped you off and asked for your help, Su Yu said meaningfully. Mu Songhai was slightly stunned. She had arrived in time to save the Shui family and many other families because of a mysterious person who tipped her off. At that time, Jian Xian had sealed off the vicinity of Twin Star Island. Even messages could not leave that area. Logically, no one could have informed Jian Xian. In the end, Mu Songhai still received the message. Jian Ruxiong was extremely angry. If not for this person's message, how could Jian Xian have fallen into such a situation? Mu Songhai smiled as she looked around Jian Xian. Although this person sent the message anonymously, I still found out who it was. The Starry Pavilion was powerful, so it was not difficult to find out the source of the message. Su Yu was slightly surprised. Based on Mu Songhai's gaze, could it be someone from Jian Xian? He did not remember being on good terms with anyone from Jian Xian. Could it be Tian Jinyuan? But Tian Jinyuan did not take the risk of betraying Jian Xian to secretly help him. It's him. Mu Songhai hooked his finger, and a young man hiding in the crowd of Jian Xian was hooked out. He was brought before them. It's you. Su Yu was startled, then suddenly understood. Finally, he patted his shoulder. Well done, Hong Lei. The person who secretly sent the message was none other than the arrogant young man who had a conflict with Su Yu and almost caused the destruction of the Shui family. He was the special envoy of Jian Xian, Hong Lei. Jian Ruxiong was furious. So it's you, traitor. No wonder the news was leaked. Hong Lei's face was pale and bitter. Now that he had been recognized, how could Jian Ruxiong let him go? Once Mu Songhai and the others left, Hong Lei's heart turned to ashes at the thought of the terrible consequences. The reason why he helped Shui Yu was not because he was benevolent. He was worried that Jian Ruxiong would capture Shui Yu and search his soul. He would find out what he had done. In the end, he had become a traitor of the faction, and his fate would be even more terrible. Cabinet Master, this person and I have a grudge. Kindness and hatred balance each other. Kindness is greater than hatred. Please help him settle down. Hearing this, Mu Songhai did not find it troublesome. Instead, he admired Su Yu even more. It was important to have a grateful heart. Even Shui Yu could put himself in the shoes of a benefactor who had a grudge against him, let alone Su Yu. If the headquarters appreciated him very much, would he forget about her when he became successful in the future? Well said. You are Hong Lei, right? From today on, you are no longer a member of Jian Xian, but an envoy of the Starry Pavilion. Mu Songhai did not give Jian Ruxiong any face. Hong Lei, who had long been disheartened, had an illusion that he had been blinded by happiness. Not only had he escaped, but he had also become an envoy of the Starry Pavilion? The status of the latter was much higher than that of the people of Jian Xian. Even if he met Jian Ruxiong again, he would have to be wary. The rest of the people of Jian Xian cast jealous glances at him. An envoy of the Starry Pavilion was an existence that ordinary people could not afford to offend. Most of them could not reach such a level even if they worked hard for a lifetime. Thank you, Cabinet Master. Hong Lei will never forget your kindness. Hong Lei knelt down and bowed. Mu Songhai smiled. He is the one you should thank. Hong Lei was very clever. He turned around and bowed again. Thank you, Master Shui. I am willing to be your slave and serve you. Haha, you are very clever. Mu Songhai laughed in surprise. You know Master Shui has a bright future. Su Yu smiled calmly. You deserve it. Some people had been dealt with. Some things had not been dealt with. Sword Master, did you just say that you are willing to compensate me with anything? I wonder if that includes the thing under my feet? Su Yu looked at the huge stone sword under his feet with a faint smile. Chapter 1639. If he remembered correctly, there was an aura of a dragon in the stone sword. That must be the spirit of the stone sword. The stone sword? Jian Ruxiong glared at Su Yu. The stone sword was like a treasure to Jian Xian. Many of Jian Xian's superb sword techniques originated from the stone sword. Wouldn't taking this away be destroying Jian Xian's foundation? Since you have returned safely, there is no way to make up for it. Please don't make things difficult for me, Jian Ruxiong refused. Su Yu laughed. Make things difficult? When you use the power of the faction to hunt me down, did you ever think of making things difficult for me? Or do you want me to report what you have done to the headquarters of the Star Pavilion? The headquarters of the Star Pavilion was like a sharp thorn that had been nailed into Jian Ruxiong's spiritual platform. Master Shui, I am willing to make up for the mistakes I have made. Please be magnanimous. The stone sword is very important to Jian Xian. Su Yu's eyes turned cold. Sword Master, do you think that I'm a pushover just because I let go of the grudge between us? I dare not. Jian Ruxiong was furious. If not for the deterrence of the headquarters of the Star Pavilion, Su Yu would be nothing in his eyes. He could kill Su Yu with a single strand of his hair. At least, that was what he thought. Then get out of my way. Su Yu exerted strength in his feet and shook them fiercely. The stone sword shook the nearby ground with a bang and loosened up. Jian Ruxiong shouted, Stop! Swish! The ancient figure flickered before him, and a pair of cold eyes pierced over like icy blades. Jian Ruxiong, I advise you to let Master Shui have whatever he wants. Otherwise, I don't mind stretching my body a little more. She glanced at the remaining peaks threateningly. Jian Ruxiong said angrily, Mu Songhai, you should know what the stone sword means to me. In his anger, he even called out the name of the Star Pavilion Master, which showed how angry he was. Mu Songhai smiled indifferently. Jian Ruxiong clenched his teeth and hesitated. Thump! Thump! Suddenly, a series of heartbeats came from within the stone sword, as if the sleeping spirit within had awakened. The spirit of the stone sword? Jian Ruxiong was shocked. Then, he shouted, the one who triggered the spirit of the stone sword was you, Shuiyu? On the day of the 10,000 Dragon Cave, the artifact spirit of the stone sword suddenly awakened, alarming Jian Ruxiong. He immediately captured a large number of people from the island forces near the stone sword and searched their souls one by one. In the end, he found nothing. So that person was Shuiyu. This stone sword came from the Myriad Dragon Cave's dragon domain. When it was discovered, it had already nailed a divine dragon at the level of the divine warrior of heaven and earth to death. If he could activate the weapon spirit and refine this sword, he would be invincible among the overlords. Jian Ruxiong was confident that he wouldn't even need to fear the lofty purple dream monarch. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't activate the artifact spirit. This had become his greatest regret. Therefore, when he realized that someone had awakened the artifact spirit, he was extremely excited. Unfortunately, that person was not among the people who were captured that day. Now that the person who had awakened the sword spirit was none other than Su Yu, who was right in front of him, He was extremely shocked. While he was shocked, his mind raced. A trace of madness spread in his heart. Not only did Su Yu have the ability to awaken the stone sword's artifact spirit, but he also had the royal power dragon sovereign sword, the Dragon Emperor's treasure. If he could capture him and obtain two reverse treasures at the same time, so what if he was hunted down by the Star Pavilion and the Sword Pavilion was destroyed? As long as he was given time to refine it, becoming the fourth divine warrior of heaven and earth in the sea of constellations was not out of reach. Most importantly, there was only one person standing in front of him, Mu Songhai. The madness grew stronger and stronger, and finally replaced reason. He made a decision and stepped into the gates of hell. Evil creature, that's enough! Jian Ruxiong roared. You stole my stone dragon bone sword, and now you're trying to take the stone sword. Do you really think there's no one in the sword pavilion? His eyes narrowed into a pair of sword-shaped pupils, exactly like his son Jian Feiming. The difference was that the pair of sword-shaped pupils were extremely powerful. Wherever his gaze passed, it was as if an invisible sword of light had swept past. Mu Songhai seemed overbearing, but in fact, he was already prepared. Although Jian Ruxiong's attack was sudden, Mu Songhai dealt with it easily. Divine light flashed around him, and a barrier appeared. On the barrier, dense sword marks flashed like raindrops. Jian Ruxiong, I didn't expect you to really dare to attack me. Mu Songhai glanced at the stone sword that seemed to have a beating heart. She looked calm on the surface, but secretly she was slightly helpless. The worst result had happened. Jian Ruxiong had been forced to rebel. Your Star Pavilion has gone too far. The Sword Pavilion will not allow anyone to trample on our dignity. Jian Ruxiong raised his arm and shouted. The mountain guarding formation of the Sword Pavilion, open. Swish, swish. In an instant, countless swords sounded from all directions of the central island. One by one, the swords flew across the sky. Their heads and tails joined together, covering the sky and sealing off the entire central island. Locking the central island and not allowing anyone to leave? Hong Lei's heart sank and he smiled bitterly. It's over. The mountain guarding formation's aura is connected to the central island. Unless the entire island is destroyed, attacking the seal alone will not be effective. Su Yu stopped taking out the sword and looked up at the sky. His eyes were calm. It was as if he was not surprised by Jian Ruxiong's actions. Looking at Mu Songhai, Su Yu said, Cabinet Master, it looks like a fierce battle is inevitable. Mu Songhai smiled confidently. Master Shui, don't worry. As long as I'm still alive, I will not allow you to be hurt. Su Yu calmly looked at the few peak masters, who were gradually approaching him, and sighed silently. If Jian Xian risked his life, even Mu Songhai might not be able to escape unscathed, let alone ensure Shui Yu's safety. That is not up to you. Sure enough, Jian Ruxiong let out a heavy grunt. Everyone from the Sword Pavilion, listen up. Whoever captures Shui Yu alive will be rewarded with the trust of the Sword Pavilion's Peak Master and the right to enter the Hidden Sword Pavilion for free forever. Hearing this, many of the disciples were envious. The opportunity to reach the heavens was right in front of them. As for the 8 Peak Masters, if you help me stop Mu Songhai, I will appoint you as the Deputy Sword Master. Jian Ruxiong threw out an even more tempting bait to the Peak Masters. The Deputy Pavilion Master of the Sword Pavilion had never held a position in the faction. But the power he wielded was unimaginable. For the Peak Masters who had been fighting with each other all year round, becoming a Deputy Pavilion Master would mean that they were above the other Peak Masters. With a few words, the ambition of the people of the Sword Pavilion was stirred. The disciples gradually surrounded Shui Yu, while the Peak Masters gathered around Jian Ruxiong. On one side was the entire Sword Pavilion, and on the other side was Mu Songhai and Su Yu, who came alone. Jian Ruxiong thought to himself, I'll take the risk. Go. Jian Ruxiong gritted his teeth and bellowed. His eyes flashed as he took the lead and charged forward. The 8 Overlord Peak Masters followed Jian Ruxiong and attacked Mu Songhai. Mu Songhai's old body released a majestic murderous intent. Those who oppose the Starry Pavilion will be killed without mercy. However, the people of the Sword Pavilion had been completely aroused by greed and ambition, and threats were not effective. Furious roars rolled out from within the Sword Pavilion, accompanied by sharp attacks. Mu Songhai glanced at Xueyu helplessly and separated a part of his divine energy to protect Xueyu. He said, "Master Xue, I will open a path, you go first." Su Yu said, "Pavilion Master, you don't have to be distracted by me. It will be difficult for them to kill me." Buzz. Su Yu's whole body shook, and a strong divine energy rippled around him. "Divine energy, have you become a Cavern World Senior?" Mu Songhai was surprised, but immediately felt slightly relieved. When he was still a level 4 mortal fairy, Su Yu could cross realms and defeat a level 3 Cavern World Senior. Now that he had broken through the shackles, a level 1 Cavern World Senior should be able to execute a few moves. As long as he was not too far away from her, he should be able to rescue her in time. With no worries behind him, Mu Songhai no longer had to worry about attacking. The battle between the two sides broke out in an instant. Jian Ruxiong held the Mahayana sword in his hand and charged forward with the momentum of 1,000 men. The 8 Peak Masters behind him joined forces, and their momentum was not much weaker than Jian Ruxiong's. Mu Songhai was alone, and he cast a powerful divine technique to fight against the crowd. Boom! In an instant, terrifying fluctuations spread throughout the central island. The central island, which had been quiet for tens of millions of years, suddenly trembled violently. The surrounding seawater surged, the wind roared, the mountains collapsed, and the earth cracked. It was like the end of the world. Although Jian Ruxiong had the advantage of numbers, Mu Songhai was the master of the Starry Pavilion's sub-pavilion, and the divine technique he cultivated was superior to Jian Xian's. Therefore, for a moment, Mu Songhai was able to fight against them alone. 10 Overlord-level strong men were fighting on the central island. At the same time, the disciples of the Sword Pavilion, who had lost their minds, also launched a fierce siege on Xueyu. Looking around at the pairs of eyes that were filled with numbness, indifference, and greed like that of a beast, Su Yu shook his head and sighed. "I thought I didn't have to kill." Despite being chased so miserably, Su Yu stuck to the bottom line of not killing the innocent and did not pursue the responsibility of the ordinary disciples. However, it seemed that not many people appreciated his kindness. With a self-deprecating smile, Su Yu's feet were suspended in the air. He left the stone sword under his feet and looked coldly at those approaching. "Xueyu, you in short, you deserve to die." An old man in a plain robe mumbled the excuse of attacking with good reason. However, after searching his mind, he could not find any fault with Su Yu. Su Yu smiled indifferently. Without saying a word, he flicked his finger and a mass of purple-red light appeared. The intense divine paths of time and space were incomparably majestic. The old man dodged it nimbly and yelled, "Trying to plot against me, you're too." Strangely, the colorful light that he had clearly dodged caused a distortion in the space and fell directly on the old man's shoulder. Then, a scene that made everyone gasp uncontrollably appeared. In just 3 short breaths, the old man reverted to the state of a newborn baby, wailing on the ground. The crowd, who had been excited and greedy, was dumbfounded. What kind of bizarre magical power was this? However, the horror only lasted for a moment, and it was immediately driven by ambition. No matter how powerful the divine technique was, there was a limit. They did not believe that he could perform it continuously. "You with the surname Xue, surrender." A young woman who was proficient in the path of binding shouted. The shadow behind her turned into a long pitch-black snake, entangling Xueyu. Before she had time to rejoice, Su Yu casually spat out a mouthful of black mist, which drifted onto the shadow. The pitch-black shadow immediately sizzled and decayed into nothingness. Not only that, the black mist followed the shadow and instantly spread to the woman's body. There wasn't even a scream. The woman was like a shadow, decaying into dust. Apart from a pile of dust, there was only a drifting black mist that gave off a strong smell of death. Death, divine Tao! Someone cried out in alarm, feeling even more horrified. The reversal of space-time just now and the death god Tao now. How many god Taos did this person cultivate? However, the more it was so, the more their greed was stimulated. Go. Capture him, and your career will soar. Don't hold back anymore. This person is dangerous. Let's injure him severely first. Su Yu shook his head and sighed. It's really troublesome. With a wave of his sleeve, a snow-white disk floated into his palm. Looking at the object, Su Yu said calmly, "It's been a long time, World Annihilation Plate." The World Annihilation Plate was one of the few things that had been taken from the original body. It could be said that it had played an important role in the lost god domain. He tossed the World Annihilation Plate into the air. It grew with the wind and rapidly expanded to 10 million feet. Hundreds of World Devastator cannons descended from the bottom of the snow-white disk. Without giving the people rushing over any time to react, the World Devastator cannon immediately fired. Puff, puff. Muffled explosions filled the air. Thousands of Sword Pavilion disciples were blasted into dust on the spot. There was a huge empty space among the densely packed crowd. The sudden appearance of the great killing weapon had killed thousands of experts in an instant. They were finally scared out of their wits, as if they had just woken up from a dream. Those who were lucky enough to escape death were ashen-faced. They stared at the hundreds of World Devastator cannons and gasped. In the face of such a cold and powerful object, their advantage in numbers was non-existent. Run! That Shui guy is going to start a massacre! Someone shouted in shock. The people in front of them turned around and ran. Jian Ruxiong roared in anger. Bastard! It's just an Emperor-level divine weapon, a mere replica. Attack together. Whoever retreats will be considered a traitor according to the faction's laws and will be sentenced to death. The people who were running hesitated and fell into a struggle. At that moment, Mu Songhai bellowed, "A bunch of fools! The Sword Pavilion dared to openly attack the Star Pavilion. They are destined to be annihilated by the Star Pavilion. Why don't you seize the opportunity to escape? Why are you still staying in the Sword Pavilion? Are you waiting to be buried with Jian Ruxiong?" Some of the smarter ones had already realized that Jian Ruxiong was putting everything on the line and had already given up on the Sword Pavilion. Now that they heard Mu Songhai's words, how could they still hesitate? Buzz! The mountain defense formation was activated by itself. The disciples who were in charge of the sword formation had chosen to escape. It didn't matter whether Jian Ruxiong succeeded or not. The Sword Pavilion was about to sink. Therefore, the disciples of the Sword Pavilion no longer hesitated. They all ran away. Even the peak leaders who were fighting with Mu Songhai were hesitating. Jian Ruxiong panicked and yelled, "Everyone, if this is done, I'll share all the resources I have with you. With these resources you can find a place to hide and cultivate for thousands of years. Why would you be afraid of the Starry Pavilion?" The promise from the deputy pavilion leader of the Sword Pavilion was gone. "If you still think it's not enough, I am willing to go with you to comprehend the secrets of the Stone Dragon Bone Sword and the Stone Sword's weapon spirit." Jian Ruxiong saw that normal bait was not enough to attract them, so he changed his words. Only then did they become determined. "Seventh Peak Leader, we will hold Mu Songhai back. You go and capture Shuiyu." Jian Ruxiong immediately arranged. The seventh peak leader was good at close combat. He had a powerful aura. In terms of ability, he was no weaker than the Green Shadow Peak leader, who was good at space technique. It will be over in 3 breaths. The seventh peak leader retreated from the battle. His golden muscles were glowing. He stared at Shuiyu with a cold smile. He said excitedly, "I never thought that there would be a day when I would openly go against the Star Pavilion. It's exciting enough, but not satisfying enough." He looked at the world annihilation plate above his head with disdain, a little regretful. He meant that capturing Suyu was not challenging at all. Suyu could not help but laugh. He said leisurely, "Satisfying enough is easy, as long as you can afford it." Chapter 1640. The huge world annihilation plate shrunk back to the size of a palm, spinning in the air. "First form!" Suyu shouted, and the world annihilation plate spun even faster. The sharp edges of the world annihilation plate sliced through the air, causing the air to ripple. Wisps of a terrifying aura were unleashed. The seventh peak master, who had been full of excitement, suddenly froze. The second form of the world annihilation plate made him feel threatened. "Didn't you want to have fun? I'll grant you your wish." Suyu pointed at the world annihilation plate. Creak. A streak cut through the sky, the sound of the air being torn apart a moment later. The seventh peak master's expression changed, and he hurriedly took out a green talisman. Pinching two fingers together, the talisman exploded, emitting a dark red glow. A dark red wooden umbrella appeared within the light. It spun gently and enveloped the seventh peak master. Ding! At that moment there was a crisp sound. The world annihilation plate had cut through the sky, striking the umbrella's cover. After the faint sound of metal clashing, the world annihilation plate was sent flying. The seventh peak master broke out in a cold sweat. Luckily, he had great reflexes, or else he would have been caught in a moment of carelessness. What a powerful divine weapon, much stronger than a low-class true Emperor divine weapon. The seventh peak master snorted angrily. "Unfortunately, it ends here." Whoosh! The seventh peak master took out a sword-shaped talisman. It was yellow, dim, and broken. "Divine soldier talisman," the seventh peak master growled. The yellow talisman shattered, exploding with a yellow glow. A giant golden-armored ape appeared, its entire body glowing with golden light. It beat its chest, roaring angrily, emitting a fierce aura. "Kill!" The seventh peak master pointed at Suyu. The giant ape sensed something, staring at Suyu with its empty eyes. With a roar, it came crashing down like a mountain. Two giant hands, the size of two small boats, grabbed the world annihilation plate, while the other grabbed at Suyu. It happened in the blink of an eye, giving no time to react. He had been captured. Haha, exciting is exciting, but satisfying. The seventh peak master laughed as he looked at the world annihilation plate. "Is that so?" Suyu's expression was calm as he muttered an incantation. The world annihilation plate, which had clearly been caught, suddenly changed drastically. From the edge of the world annihilation plate, tens of thousands of rays of white light shot out and closed in an oval arc. It formed a cage of divine light that was narrow at both ends and wide in the middle. This was the second form of the world annihilation plate cage. Back then, Suyu was caught off guard and fell into a trap. If the giant ape didn't know what was going on, it would be asking for trouble. Of course, the seventh peak master, who was smiling confidently, was also trapped in the cage. "You schemed against me? So what?" The seventh peak master's smile faded as he took out another ancient bronze talisman. This object emitted a dangerous aura that was completely different from the previous two symbols, and it caused Suyu's eyelids to twitch. Mu Songhai, who was fighting, couldn't help but be attracted by this item. With one look, his face darkened. "Be careful, that's the immortal execution talisman from the black market. Its power is comparable to a silver overlord." Silver overlord? Suyu's heart skipped a beat. After coming to the great beginning realm, he had read many books and understood the division of cultivation. There were also strong and weak overlords. Those who had just entered the overlord realm were classified as bronze overlord. The 10 great peak masters of the Sword Pavilion, the Icy Fairy of the Starry Pavilion, and the deputy pavilion master Yen Changhong were all bronze overlords, and the two people in front of him were silver overlords. Mu Songhai's sword was heroic. Above him were gold overlords and celestial overlord. There were still a few bronze overlords in the sword pavilion, but there were only 2 silver overlords. The power of a silver overlord did not need to be described. Its power could not be resisted. Otherwise, he would die on the spot like the icy fairy. How could Su Yu allow him to destroy the talisman? With a flash of light in his eyes, the 10,000 rays of divine light suddenly contracted, and the cage instantly shrank into a crack. Ah, Sword Master, save me! A shrill scream reverberated throughout the universe. All that was left was a pool of blood that had been squeezed into tiny pieces and slid down the cage. The immortal execution talisman that had not been detonated in time floated into Su Yu's palm. A strike from a silver overlord? Su Yu rubbed the talisman, looking thoughtfully at the many peak masters surrounding Mu Songhai. That one look scared them out of their wit. 7th, that idiot, how could he let his life-saving treasure fall into the hands of the Shui family? This is not good, Run. There was Mu Songhai, the silver overlord, and Shui Yu's immortal execution talisman at the back. If the two worked well together, it would be enough to take down the remaining peak masters in one fell swoop. Swish, swish, swish. The remaining peak masters felt their scalps go numb, and they quickly retreated from the battlefield. In the end, only Jian Ruxiong was left holding on. Sensing Shui Yu's gaze behind him, he felt a little uneasy and cursed. Useless. You can't even take care of a junior who has just broken through to the deity level. Even so, he retreated very rationally to avoid a pincer attack from behind. You guys, get rid of that brat, just leave his soul behind. Jian Ruxiong yelled. However, Peak Master Wui dared to step forward. What a joke, with the strike of a silver overlord in his hand, who would dare to seek death? You guys don't want the great opportunity anymore, do you? Jian Ruxiong threatened coldly. Mu Songhai's siege was broken, and he felt much more relaxed. He shouted coldly, You guys, retreat now, and the Star Pavilion will not hold you responsible for killing the Pavilion Branch Master. If you are stubborn, humph, let's not talk about whether you can succeed or not. Can you really hide from the headquarters of the Star Pavilion after this? The Peak Masters hesitated on the spot. After this incident, the Sword Pavilion was destined to be destroyed. They insisted on following Jian Ruxiong to commit treacherous acts just to get the so-called opportunity. However, judging from the current situation, they would probably die here before they could get the opportunity. Fools, you guys are just being used by Jian Ruxiong. Will he really give you the so-called opportunity? I don't think so, right? Mu Songhai crushed their last hope. Don't think about it anymore. Retreat now is your last choice. Don't listen to her nonsense. Jian Ruxiong roared. However, after exchanging glances with each other, the Peak Masters gradually dispersed towards the periphery in unison. Sword Master, I'm afraid I can't be of much help. Goodbye. Please forgive me, Sword Master. I can't accompany you to the end. Goodbye. Swish, swish, swish. Seeing that the other Peak Masters had left, the Peak Masters who wanted to persist also gave up and left. In the end, only Jian Ruxiong was left. A bunch of ingrates. Jian Ruxiong held the Mahayana sword in his hand and snorted angrily. Now that things had come to this, it would be extremely difficult for him to capture Su Yu alone. Coupled with the fairy execution talisman in Su Yu's hands, it was a slight threat. If he really fought with all his might, the chances of him dying would greatly increase. Jian Ruxiong glared at Su Yu and said, You can take the stone sword, but remember, this matter will not end here. Because of him, the Sword Pavilion had no choice but to be erased from the Sword Pavilion's territorial waters. With such deep hatred, he would not rest until he killed Su Yu with his own hands. Su Yu said calmly, Anytime. He tossed the World Annihilation Plate into the air. It expanded and shot out a ball of spatial light, sucking the giant stone sword into it. Mu Songhai stood in front of Su Yu, staring at Jian Ruxiong with a cold expression. Before threatening Shuiyu, you should worry about yourself first. Those who dare to challenge the Starry Pavilion never end well, and you will not be an exception. Humph! Jian Ruxiong snorted coldly and flew towards the Sword Pavilion's main palace to pack up the Sword Pavilion's many years of resources. He was prepared to escape. Mu Songhai turned to stare at Su Yu, his heart in turmoil. What was that white disc? In terms of sharpness, most true Emperor Divine weapons could not compare. Even she had a slight headache when she encountered it. It was because Su Yu had hidden his abilities so well that he could kill the 7th Peak Master unexpectedly, seize the fairy-slaying talisman, and resolve the situation. Master Shui hid his abilities really well, Mu Songhai said. It looks like the guards I arranged were unnecessary. Su Yu thought of the Ice Soul Fairy and the few missing Starry Pavilion faction members, and he lamented, Cabinet Master, those guards. Mu Songhai waved his hand. Master Shui, do not mind them. They were already prepared to die. It is their fortune to die for you. Su Yu sighed silently, speechless. The fates of insignificant people were so sad and uncontrollable. Even death was not in their hands. A feeling of the fickleness of fate lingered in Su Yu's heart. Cabinet Master, may I ask if there are any relics left behind? Su Yu asked. Mu Songhai did not understand, but nodded. There are some in the sub-pavilion. Then let's make a trip to the sub-pavilion, Su Yu said. He still could not accept the innocent people dying for him with a clear conscience. Although it was troublesome, he had no regret. Mu Songhai said, It just so happens that someone is waiting for you in the sub-pavilion. Who is it? Su Yu was surprised. Mu Songhai's smile deepened. It is a special envoy sent by Lord Hu. He is announcing the order from the headquarters of the Starry Pavilion. Lord Hu? Su Yu did not know the identity of this Lord Hu. Since it is an order from the headquarters, what does it have to do with me? I am only the Deputy Cabinet Master of the Sub-Pavilion. I don't think the headquarters would take me seriously, right? Su Yu said. Mu Songhai was full of smiles. Master Shui, do not be modest. The fact that you are proficient in the various languages of the different races has alarmed the headquarters. Lord Hu wants to meet you personally. As for the order, it has a lot to do with you, Master Shui. What is the content of the order? Can you reveal it to me? Su Yu asked. Mu Songhai took out an invitation made of incredible ice stone and said, This is an invitation to the ancient dream altar. The headquarters only have 10 of them. Because of your uniqueness, they made an exception and gave one to our sub-pavilion, inviting you and me to participate in the ancient dream altar together. Ancient dream altar? Su Yu frowned, intending to decline the invitation. He held the cold little hand in his and said, I have to go to the land of the extreme north. I am afraid I have no time to be distracted. According to the original agreement, they would not restrict Su Yu's actions. The land of the extreme north? Mu Songhai was startled. His expression softened as he smiled. That is a great coincidence. The ancient dream altar is in the land of the extreme north. It does not conflict with Master Shui's itinerary. Su Yu was surprised. Such a coincidence? If that was the case, there was no reason to refuse. He said, All right. Before long, Mu Songhai quickly left the place with Su Yu. Jian Ruxiong also brought along some of the loyal disciples of the Jian Xian. Before leaving, he asked them, Why hasn't Faming returned after so long? Everyone was silent. Only one person stood up. It was Tuo Boing. He said hesitantly, reporting to the sword master, the young master seemed to have gone to retrieve the corpse of the giant snake and did not return. Jian Ruxiong's expression changed slightly. He shouted, Why didn't you say so earlier? He took out a bamboo tube. The words, Jian Faming, were carved on the bamboo tube, and Jian Feiming's essence blood was in it. He opened the bamboo tube, and a small sword that had been broken into two fell out. The sword was destroyed and the man died. Feiming, he died. Jian Ruxiong's vigorous body trembled as he howled in grief. Who killed him? Who? Tuoba Ying rolled his eyes and said, I'm guessing it might be Shuiyu. Why do you think so? Although Jian Ruxiong hated Shuiyu, he was not so foolish as to lose his rationality. Tuoba Ying said, the evil ghost's strait was sealed off by us, and there shouldn't be any dangerous creatures there. However, the young master did not return. This can only mean one thing. There is someone who could kill Shuiyu hiding under the sea, and the most likely person there is Shuiyu. As he said this, Jian Ruxiong's eyes shone brightly. Jian Xian had mobilized many forces and dug deep into the ground, but they had not found Shuiyu. It was as if he had vanished from the face of the earth. Now that they thought about it, Suyu was not hiding on the Thousand-Star Island. He was obviously hiding right under their noses. The most dangerous place is the safest place. Jian Ruxiong laughed angrily. Great! How dare you, Shuiyu? How dare you fool us, the Sword Pavilion? If I don't get my revenge, I, Jian Ruxiong, am not a man. Let's go. With a furious roar, Jian Ruxiong led a large group of people and surged toward the north. The Sword Pavilion returned to its deathly silence. 2 months later, an eerie shriek reverberated in the sky above the silent central island. At the entrance of the Cave of 10,000 Dragons, 9 extremely ferocious creatures that had materialized surrounded a young man who was surrounded by a bloody aura. The terrifying aura of the Bronze Overlord swept across the surroundings. Together with the 9 extremely ferocious creatures, it gave people extreme psychological pressure. Bronze Overlord, ha 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 ha, I Gu Taishu, will also become an overlord one day. Gu Taishu laughed loudly. Suyu, I really want to meet you soon. You will be very surprised then. Suyu, who looked calm, followed Mu Tsanghai back to the Star Pavilion on the random Star Island. All the important members of the pavilion came forward to welcome them, including the Deputy Pavilion Master, Yen Changhong. Looking at Mu Tsanghai, who had brought Suyu back in a friendly and cordial manner, Yen Changhong was jealous. Shuiyu had only joined the Star Pavilion for a few months, and not only had he gained the appreciation of Mu Tsanghai, but he had also gained the appreciation of the headquarters. They had invited him to participate in the Ancient Dream Altar's invitation in the Northern Snow Sea. As a veteran of the Star Pavilion, how could Yen Changhong be convinced? Rise, all of you. Mu Tsanghai was in a good mood. He asked, is the special envoy sent by Lord Hu still in the pavilion? Yen Changhong's eyes flickered with a strange light. She said, reporting to the cabinet master, he has already returned. Just as the cabinet master was feeling regretful, Yen Changhong said, however, the special envoy left behind a magical artifact and left a message saying that it was prepared for the deputy pavilion master. Mu Tsanghai asked expectantly, what is it? Yen Changhong took out a flower. The flower was a space cavern world. Chapter 1641. Test? Suyu raised his eyebrows. Test what? Master Shui, don't worry. The test is not malicious. Instead, it will greatly benefit Master Shui's future status in the Star Pavilion. Ordinary people are not qualified to be tested by the headquarters. For example, the appraisers of the sub-pavilions, no matter how great their contributions are, the headquarters will never specially grant them a one flower, one world test. These words struck a chord in Yen Changhong's heart. Not to mention the appraisers, even as a deputy pavilion master, she was not qualified to be tested by the headquarters. One flower, one world. It was personally forged by the founder of the Stellar Pavilion, the Stellar Sovereign. It contains thousands of worlds, and being within it can stimulate one's greatest potential. Many people with outstanding aptitudes can break through to the divine Tao from within. It is boundlessly mysterious. Mu Tsanghai held this item in high esteem. Of course, being in it, one flower, one world can record the relevant qualifications of the person who enters, especially the qualifications that the Star Pavilion wants to see, such as your proficiency in the alien language. So it was the alien language? Suyu nodded. This was also the reason why he became a deputy pavilion master. Would the Star Pavilion be able to detect his potential in other aspects? He had many secrets and did not want them to be discovered so easily by outsiders. Mu Songhai understood and added, "This test will only record Master Shue's attainments in the alien language. Is that so?" Suyu was relieved and nodded. "Well, since it is a request from the headquarters, I will give it a try." With a smile, Mu Songhai opened the flower world. Suyu took a look and leaped into it. Mu Songhai's smile faded and he looked at Yen Changhong. "Changhong, you were trained by me. I don't want to see you make any mistakes. What else did the special envoy say before he left? Tell me the truth." Yen Changhong, who was secretly proud of herself, was so frightened that she knelt down and begged for mercy. "Spare me, Pavilion Master. Changhong, I did not mean to hide anything. Speak." Mu Songhai's eyes shone with a deep light. Yen Changhong said, "The special envoy warned me before he left that the higher-ups were also very interested in his strength. After all, as a mortal fairy, he defeated a level 4 cavern world senior. His qualifications are considered good in the headquarters. So, in addition to testing for the alien language, they also set up a strength test. I did not mean to hide anything, but, Mu Songhai sighed and said, "It's because you're jealous and want to embarrass him, isn't it? The test of strength has always been exaggerated. Many people have been put in a difficult situation because of it. He is just a junior mortal fairy. How can he withstand it?" Yen Changhong lowered her head. In front of the pavilion master, nothing could escape her eyes. Unexpectedly, Mu Songhai was not angry at all. Instead, there was a hint of playfulness in his voice. "However, you won't be able to see his sorry state." Recalling the miserable state of the Sword Pavilion's 7th Peak Master, Mu Songhai couldn't help but want to laugh. He thought to himself, "I'm afraid that even in their dreams, the headquarters would never imagine what kind of monster my Sword Pavilion's Sea Region branch has recruited." Yen Changhong was slightly puzzled and unconvinced. She stared at the world without blinking. When Suyu entered the world of flowers, a strange scene played in front of him. It was a world brimming with life, filled with all sorts of living creatures. Their cultivation levels were not very high, with the most powerful being merely at the Wanxiang Adept level. Even mortal fairies had not touched that level, let alone cave world venerables. On the ground, in a grand sect, 2 old men were talking in a pavilion at the top of a mountain. "I've had some enlightenment about heaven and earth recently." The one who spoke was an old man in a Taoist robe. He had a sage-like demeanor, but his lifespan was nearing its end. He only had a few months left to live. Sitting opposite him was the monk in the gold-threaded kasaya. He looked dignified. "What a coincidence, I have it too." His lifespan was still tens of thousands of years long. "My lifespan is nearing its end. I suddenly feel that life and death are unpredictable. You and I are as insignificant as ants in the world. I feel that perhaps you and I are not the strongest in this world. There should be a more powerful existence watching us." The old man looked up at the endless sky, his eyes shining with a profound light. Unfortunately, with his weak strength, he could not see through Suyu, who was silently looking down on them from the 9th heaven. "Not so," the monk said. "My enlightenment is the opposite." He looked around and said, "The birth of heaven and earth from nothingness should be the work of fate. You and I are the strongest in this world. Look at the changing of the seasons and the rise of martial arts. Which of these are not developed by ourselves? Have there ever been any influence from external forces? No. Turned out that the 2 of them were the 2 strongest people in this world. After today's sparring, they exchanged insights. One had an epiphany, and there was always a sky beyond the sky. The other had an epiphany, and the world had become independent. Su Yu sighed. As the spirit of the Zhenlong continent, he had never thought that there was a sky beyond the sky. However, the monk's words were not unreasonable. Everything went on according to the rules, and there was never any external interference. This made Su Yu slightly aware. Didn't he also believe that the absolute beginning realm was born out of the dark, that it appeared from the chaos? Then, would there be an invisible existence like Su Yu in the great beginning realm now, looking down on the great beginning realm? Thinking of this, he had a few epiphanies. At that moment, a heavenly book in alien language fell in front of Su Yu like a snowflake. Su Yu caught it and understood tacitly. This must be the so-called test. After opening it, he casually translated it into a language that could be understood by one flower and one world, and threw it down. Coincidentally, this book was picked up by a mediocre young man. Su Yu was slightly puzzled. What was the point of this test? Boom! All of a sudden, thunder sounded above his head, as if time and space had exploded. Then, Su Yu was surprised to find that the flow of time on the continent below was accelerated by 10,000 times. Half a year passed in the blink of an eye, and the old man passed away. Before his death, his eyes were always looking at the endless starry sky, full of doubt and powerlessness. 100 years passed in the blink of an eye. 100 years after the old man's death, the Path faction he founded was replaced by a huge force called the Sky-Splitting Valley. The leader of the Sky-Splitting Valley was none other than the young man who picked up the foreign divine art that Su Yu had thrown away 100 years ago. After obtaining this book, his strength improved by leaps and bounds. From a mediocre young man, he became a contemporary expert. He fought all year round, gradually dominating the world, and became the only person in the world who had broken through the mortal fairy realm. At that moment, another divine art in alien language fell in front of Su Yu. After translating it, Su Yu threw it down again. As a result, the flow of time on the continent below was accelerated by 10,000 times again. In the blink of an eye, 1,000 years passed. The situation on the continent changed dramatically, and a tripartite structure appeared. The Path faction of the past had long become the dust of history, and no one remembered it. The ones left in the world were the first force, the Sky-Splitting Valley, the second force, the Fantion Pavilion, and the third force, the Buddhist faction. Among them, the weakest was the Buddhism faction. From the position of overlord 1,000 years ago, it had fallen to the third strongest force. Then, Su Yu threw down several different foreign divine arts in succession. Every time a book fell, it accelerated the time of the world. After 20,000 years, the world had changed dramatically, and it was no longer the same as before. In the world, the Almighty was only a common level, and there were thousands of mortal fairies. There were even extreme creatures who had touched the edge of the cavern world master. He was the young man who founded the Sky-Splitting Valley. The Buddhism faction of the past had long been annihilated in the struggle for supremacy. In a remote corner, in a dilapidated temple, a hunchbacked monk with an old face was lying on the bed, dying, with only a trace of vitality left. His eyes stared at the ceiling, and tears of vicissitudes flowed from the corners of his eyes. "Old man, you were right. There are creatures in the world, looking down on us." Before dying, he vaguely remembered the last words of his lifelong friend on the peak of the Buddhism faction thousands of years ago. Only then did he believe the last words of the old man. After saying that, he closed his eyes and died. Su Yu saw it, and his heart was inexplicably touched. He couldn't help but look up at the top of his head. Would there be creatures looking down on him at this moment? Just as Su Yu was thinking about it, there was a soft tinkle in front of him. Su Yu thought it was the foreign divine arts, but when he looked closely, he saw a line of small words floating in front of him. Created a primary high-level civilization, potential value of 3 stars. Suyu was slightly stunned. Primary high-level civilization? Did it mean translating the foreign divine arts and bringing a brand new civilization to this world? Potential value should be what the Star Pavilion wanted to test. Suyu smiled. He could translate more than 10,000 kinds of foreign languages. Just now, he could not even understand 10%. If he really used all his language attainments, he was afraid that the definition of his potential value would be far more than just a few stars. The test is over, right? Suyu said to himself. Unexpectedly, he was not expelled by the world, but still stayed here. The continent below changed dramatically again, and time was accelerated 1,000,000 times. In the blink of an eye, billions of years had passed. The whole world had changed beyond recognition. From under the continent, an existence as strong as a level 2 cavern world master rushed out and flew straight towards Suyu, shouting, "What demon has appeared in this world?" It was an old woman in white, and she was now the strongest creature on the continent. Suyu was slightly startled. What was going on? Before Suyu could recover, he heard the old woman in white say coldly, "Creatures from the outside world, if you dare to challenge me again, I will not spare you." Challenge? Suyu had a flash of inspiration, and he thought to himself, "Is this a test of strength?" Seeing the old woman in white attack, Suyu thought for a moment and did not move, letting the old woman hit the top of his head with her palm. The real pain came, but Suyu did not panic at all. Sure enough, when the pain reached the extreme, the pain suddenly disappeared. The surrounding world also changed rapidly, turning into the scenery of the Star Pavilion. Unsurprisingly, death meant that he was passively removed from the world of flowers. A clear line of small words hovered above Suyu's head. Number of defeated people: 0. Potential value: 1 star. The 1 star was obtained because Suyu had become a cavern world master at a young age. Apart from that, there were no other bonuses. Suyu's expression was calm as he cupped his fists toward Mu Songhai and Yen Changhong. Yen Changhong glanced at the 1 star and shook her head gently, laughing at herself. "I am actually jealous of such a person. How ridiculous." Only Mu Songhai looked at the 1 star with a faint smile, but did not point it out. She was very clear about Suyu's true strength, which could not be measured by the 1 star. The test is complete. Master Shui, do not be discouraged. The improvement of strength lies in little by little accumulation. Do not be impatient, Mu Songhai comforted him. Suyu knew that the cabinet master was helping him conceal his shocking strength. He was grateful and said, "Thank you, cabinet master, for your guidance." "Haha, then get ready to set off." "Changhong, how is the restoration of the space-crossing mysterious cave going?" Mu Songhai asked. Yen Changhong said respectfully, reporting to cabinet master, "The cave has just been restored." "There is a space-crossing mysterious cave in our pavilion branch?" Suyu was extremely surprised. The so-called space-crossing mysterious cave was a wonderful space channel similar to space leaping. The principle was similar to space transportation, but it was countless times more advanced. It was impossible to construct a space-crossing mysterious cave unless one was at the level of a universe divine warrior. As far as Suyu knew, there were only 3 space-crossing mysterious caves in the entire sea of constellations that connected the territories of the 3 great divine warriors. The fact that the Star Pavilion branch had one was enough to shock Suyu. "Haha, so what if the Star Pavilion has a space-crossing mysterious cave?" Mu Songhai couldn't help but laugh. Back in the sea of constellations, it was thanks to the help of the powerhouses of my stellar pavilion that the 3 sovereigns could succeed. Otherwise, how could they have succeeded without any experience? Suyu was a little excited. The Star Pavilion was much more powerful than he had imagined. "Cabinet Master, what do you mean by restoring the cave?" Suyu was surprised. Mu Songhai said, "The space-crossing mysterious cave is not stable and requires an experienced divine warrior to maintain it. A few years ago, the divine warrior in charge of maintenance at the headquarters had an accident and was replaced by his disciple. That disciple's experience was not as good as his master's, so the space-crossing mysterious cave became more and more unstable. But after this restoration, there should not be any problems. You can use it without worry. Mu Songhai said, if Master Shui has nothing else, you can set off now and gather at the headquarters. You will see the rest of the people from the other pavilions there. No one knew how many pavilions the Star Pavilion had. At the very least, the introduction of the Star Pavilion in the Sword Pavilion's waters was vague. The only thing they knew was that the pavilion branch Su Yu was in was one of the weakest among the many pavilions. It was rumored that the Sword Pavilion's Sea Pavilion branch might be closed down. It was only because Mu Songhai's background was extraordinary that it had managed to survive until now. That's fine, I also want to see the rest of the pavilions, Su Yu said. Several hours later, deep beneath the Star Pavilion, this place was already deep within the sea. A revolving pitch-black vortex emitted waves of hair-raising nothingness energy. Su Yu was fearful. How could he forget the scene when he was trapped in the nothingness of the Cave of 10,000 Dragons? Once surrounded by nothingness, even if you were a divine warrior of heaven and earth, you would still lose a layer of skin. The principle of the space-crossing mysterious cave is to break the shackles of space and achieve the goal of transcending space. Hence, the surroundings of the mysterious cave are all nothingness, Mu Songhai explained. Su Yu nodded and followed Mu Songhai into the mysterious cave. As expected, once they entered, it was as if they had entered another space. In an instant, the aura of the Sword Pavilion's seas behind them disappeared without a trace. What replaced it was the boundless power of nothingness. Su Yu was using it for the first time, so he could not help but be cautious. Moreover, for some reason, he, who had mastered the way of destiny, had a bad feeling. His thread of destiny fluctuated subtly as he went deeper into the space-crossing mysterious cave. Chapter 1642. Master Shui. Mu Songhai interrupted Su Yu's thoughts. There is still some time before we reach the headquarters. I need to explain the situation of the various pavilions to you. Su Yu sighed in his heart. Wherever there were people, there would be conflict. The Starry Tower was no exception. The headquarters of the Star Pavilion is divided into the 3 Supremes and 9 Elders. The 3 Supremes are the 3 Pavilion Masters under the General Pavilion and are in charge of the affairs of the Star Pavilion. Even the 3 great sovereigns of the Sea of Constellations have to be courteous when they meet. As for the 9 Pavilion Chiefs, they are the pavilion chiefs under the jurisdiction of the 3 venerables. There are a total of 9 pavilion chiefs, and each of them possesses great authority. They are in charge of the various pavilion chiefs. My Sword Pavilion's Sea Region branch is under the jurisdiction of Pavilion Master Hu. Other than us, Pavilion Master Hu is also in charge of 100 other pavilions. The Pavilion Master who that Mu Songhai mentioned should be the Lord who that she had mentioned several times. Su Yu listened patiently and did not interrupt. This was because he knew that Mu Songhai wanted to say something more important. Sure enough, Mu Songhai said, our gathering this time is only for the 100 pavilions under Pavilion Head whose jurisdiction. We will not meet with the pavilions under the jurisdiction of other pavilion heads. But it is precisely because of this that we must be cautious in our words and actions. Back then, due to certain reasons, I offended a few branch pavilion masters. Now, they are ranked at the top of the 100 branch pavilions. I believe that they will make things difficult for you in this gathering. Therefore, Grandmaster Shui, unless it is absolutely necessary, please do not clash with them. As expected, Su Yu nodded without hesitation. Unless the one who provoked him was a silver overlord, no one would dare to provoke him. On the other hand, Yen Changhong's beautiful eyebrows inadvertently condensed a trace of worry. After saying this, Mu Songhai introduced the general situation of the headquarters to Su Yu. The group talked as they walked, slowly rushing to the end of the Yuekong mystic cave. However, Su Yu was increasingly aware that as the void-crossing mysterious cave got closer, the fluctuations of his line of destiny became clearer and clearer. He had a feeling that something bad was about to happen. In the past, Su Yu wouldn't have been able to detect it. However, as he grasped the divine path of destiny, the indescribable sense was getting stronger day by day. We're almost at the exit, but we have to be careful. This void-crossing mysterious cave has just been repaired, so it might not be completely stable yet. Don't release too much power and disturb the void-crossing mysterious cave. In front of him, a cave entrance shrouded in multicolored light came into view. Su Yu felt that the thread of fate was becoming more and more unstable. That was definitely not a good sign. All of a sudden, Su Yu discovered that there were a few smaller holes of 5 colors near the exit of the 5 colors cave, which were distributed on both sides of the exit. Along the way, Mu Tsanghai gave a detailed account of the void-traversing mysterious cave. The smaller exit was the exit to the nearby area. This was to prevent the exit of the space-crossing mysterious cave from collapsing. The people in the mysterious cave would have a way out. Su Yu's eyes flickered. When they were only a few hundred feet away from the exit, he clenched his right hand, which was hidden in his sleeve. In an instant, the law of space appeared without any warning. The void-crossing mystic cave had just been repaired and was very sensitive. The appearance of the laws had a great impact on the void-crossing mystic cavern. When Mu Tsanghai noticed the sudden birth of the law of space, it was already too late. The entire void-traversing profound cave began to tremble. The surrounding nothingness squeezed through the cave and surged wantonly. The multicolored exit flickered and disappeared, shrinking unpredictably. Mu Tsanghai's expression changed, and he hurriedly shouted, "Go!" The exit was about to collapse. "Follow me closely." Yen Changhong's face was deathly pale. Once something happened to the void-traversing profound cave, it would definitely be a matter of life and death. How could she dare to hesitate? With a leap, she followed Mu Tsanghai out of the mysterious cave. The two of them arrived outside the mysterious cave. Looking back, they could not help but feel fear. They saw the entrance of the mysterious cave collapse with a loud bang under the destruction of the nothingness. If they had been a step slower, they would have been buried in the mysterious cave. But before they could rejoice, Mu Tsanghai's heart thumped. He did not see Su Yu. "Where is Master Shui?" Mu Tsanghai stared at the collapsed entrance in disbelief. Yen Changhong also froze. He was just following behind me." The two of them stared at the exit, their hearts in a mess. Yen Changhong comforted him. "Cabinet Master, maybe he escaped from the other exits?" Mu Tsanghai nodded absent-mindedly. "That must be the case. Master Shui has always been quick-witted." Jian Ruxiong mobilized the forces of the Jian-Xian Ocean but was unable to do anything to Master Shui. "Let's go, we will immediately rush to the other exits to check." They had just left when a beautiful woman wearing a gorgeous robe slowly appeared near the collapsed exit. Her cultivation level was terrifying. She held a white feather that was gradually withering. The feather was decayed, but it still had traces of the declining fate aura. "Is it the fault of the feather of destiny?" Su Yu did not appear. The beautiful woman stared at the collapsed exit, frowning slightly. In the great beginning realm, there were only a few people who knew Su Yu's real name, and those who could ignore Shui Yu's current body and accurately find him were as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. "It seems like we need to find an expert to help us find Su Yu's whereabouts." The beautiful woman floated away, leaving behind a faint trace of the ill-fated aura. If Su Yu were here, he would definitely recognize that this was an aura similar to that of the sinful woman. After Su Yu had disturbed the Yuekong mysterious cave, he had taken advantage of their unpreparedness to choose an alternate exit. The scenery before his eyes changed, and Su Yu left the Yuekong mysterious cave. The vague feeling of the ups and downs of fate instantly disappeared without a trace. As expected, there is an unknown danger at the exit? Su Yu secretly rejoiced. The feeling just now was not an illusion, and there was indeed danger. The path of destiny that was meant to revive Xia Jingyu had inadvertently saved Su Yu's life. Uncle, that big dog seems very fierce. Is it talking to us? Little Jingyu, who was beside Su Yu, tugged at his hand and asked softly. Su Yu tilted his head to look and was slightly shocked. There was a strange dog 10,000 feet away from them. Its whole body was covered with barbs that looked like steel needles. The tips of the barbs were dark green, as if they had been dipped in poison. The dog's head extended from its forehead to both sides of its cheeks, and a dark red line of blood extended from its forehead. A pair of evil eyes were staring at Su Yu and Little Jingyu, who had suddenly appeared. The dog stared at Su Yu but did not attack. Instead, it turned around and left. However, right at that moment it suddenly turned around and dashed in front of Su Yu at an astonishing speed. The two bloody lines on its forehead opened up eerily, and its entire head split open. Within the three halves of the head, there were layers upon layers of fangs, crisscrossing with each other. It was extremely hideous. Once it bit its prey, there was no way it could escape. Unfortunately, no matter how cunning it was no match for Su Yu's instinctive vigilance. With a contemptuous smile, Su Yu casually raised a divine sword, and the sword energy swept across, cutting the strange dog in half. Little Jingyu covered her face, half an eye peeking out from between her fingers. She approached Su Yu and said, "Uncle, this dog is so fierce." Su Yu said, "This is a corpse-loving dog. It was born with the level of a world senior. It is very dangerous. Luckily, Uncle is powerful." Little Jingyu looked up at Su Yu with admiration, revealing a delicate and brilliant smile. Su Yu raised his eyes and looked into the distance, shaking his head solemnly. "No. The danger I am talking about is not its natural cultivation level, but the fact that corpse-loving dogs never act alone. There are at least 10 of them, and as many as 1,000 of them. And among them, there must be a dog king." Howl, as if responding to Su Yu's words, a loud and clear dog bark came from afar. Su Yu was at the bottom of a valley. The corpse-loving dog that he had just killed was at the top of the valley. It must have been a corpse-loving dog in charge of patrolling. Its death seemed to have attracted the attention of the other corpse-loving dogs. "We should not stay here for long. Let's go and meet up with Cabinet Master Mu," Su Yu said. He held Little Jingyu's hand and sword into the sky. Unexpectedly, a loud cry for help came from the place where the dogs were barking. "Your Excellency, are you from the Starry Pavilion? Please lend us a hand." Su Yu was taken aback. After a moment's hesitation, he turned around and flew towards the place where the dogs were barking. Looking from above, 10 Level 1 Cavern World Senior corpse-loving dogs had surrounded a man and a woman in the center. The man and the woman were not weak. They both had the strength of a Level 1 Cavern World Senior. Relying on powerful divine techniques and divine weapons, they had been fighting against the 10 corpse-loving dogs until now. It was obvious that they wanted to break out of the encirclement. However, the corpse-loving dogs were very experienced in collective movement and did not give them a chance at all. They trapped them in the center of the encirclement and continued to deplete their divine energy. Now, their divine energy was running low and they were in a precarious situation. If they did not have external help, they would become food for the corpse-loving dogs sooner or later. Seeing Su Yu approaching, the two of them looked excited. The young man shouted, "I am an appraiser from the Red Leaf Pavilion. Your Excellency has the aura of the Starry Pavilion's identity jade badge on you. You must be from the Starry Pavilion. Please lend us a hand." Red Leaf Pavilion? Su Yu had a slight impression of it. Among the 100 pavilions, it was ranked very high. Unlike the Sword Pavilion, the Red Leaf Pavilion not only trained appraisers but also young talent. It was said that they had cultivated a large number of amazing talent. This matter had alarmed a pavilion master, and he hereby commended them and summoned all the pavilions to learn from the Red Leaf Pavilion. Many pavilions followed suit and cultivated a terrifying number of young strong men. And the Red Leaf Pavilion was one of the strongest. Not only that, but the Red Leaf Pavilion was also unique in all aspects of management and ranked among the best. In contrast, the Sword Pavilion was located in a remote area, and the number of young talents under its command was pitifully small. There was no one that could be used at all. In terms of management, its annual profit was less than that of the Red Leaf Pavilion in a month. As for talent, it was even more incomparable. The Red Leaf Pavilion was full of talent. For example, the Red Leaf Pavilion had as many as 3 talented talents who were proficient in the language of the foreign tribes that Mu Songhai regarded as a treasure. He did not expect to encounter the Red Leaf Pavilion here. Suyu muttered to himself. He was not someone who would stand by and watch others die. Furthermore, they were both from the Star Pavilion, and the Red Leaf Pavilion did not have any enmity with the Sword Pavilion. After thinking for some time, Suyu took out the Beauty Under the Moon. Shreds of sharpness law gathered in his palm. The blade of the Beauty Under the Moon had an additional layer of transparent crystal light. After confirming that Suyu was going to help, the two of them were overjoyed. The man said, "Sir, we are about to use our life-saving divine technique to break free from the attack of the corpse-loving dogs. Please cooperate with us and hold back the 2 corpse-loving dogs. If we can escape, we will reward you handsomely." Break free? Suyu rubbed his chin and nodded. He then shook his head. "It is a little troublesome. Forget it, let me do it. You just have to protect yourselves." The two of them were stunned for a moment. They could tell that Suyu's cultivation level was not as high as theirs, and that was why they had requested to hold back the 2 corpses. Chapter 1643. The youth was taken aback, but he quickly recovered and said to the woman beside him, "Ninth sister, we will cooperate with this colleague." The woman looked at Suyu in astonishment. She couldn't help but wonder if there was something wrong with Suyu's mind. He was inferior to them, yet he dared to say that he could face 10 high-level corpse-loving dogs alone? She couldn't trust Suyu, so she nodded and took out a bronze-colored windmill. "Once we break through the encirclement, activate this windmill." The youth cast a hopeful look at the windmill. Although it was an Emperor-level divine weapon, once activated, it could unleash a power no weaker than a real Emperor-level divine weapon. It only had one function: escape. The instant the windmill spun, it could carry them 10 billion miles away. Even if they were chased by the bronze overlords, they could escape safely. The only drawback was that it could only be used once. At the same time, the two of them each took out a powerful talisman, preparing to use their remaining divine powers to detonate the cannons. Life and death depended on this moment. Seeing Suyu rapidly approaching with the Beauty Under the Moonlight in his hand, the two of them tensed. Once the other party attacked, it would be time for them to break through the encirclement. Swish, Suyu's clothes were as white as snow. He arrived nearby in a flash of lightning. He let out a soft shout. "Dark Night Meteor Thrust!" In an instant, the sword of light in his hand, surrounded by moonlight, burst forth with a brilliant light that resembled falling meteors. They streaked across the sky, leaving beautiful marks. Each mark hit a corpse-loving dog. No matter how agile they seemed to be locked on by the light, unable to escape. When the man and woman saw this, their eyes flashed and they shouted, "Attack! Silver Sky Fire Lion Hammer! 1,000-mile soul-chasing shuttle!" Both of them took out their life-saving treasures at the same time, and a powerful shockwave erupted from them. If nothing unexpected happened, they would be able to cooperate with Suyu from the inside and outside to create an opening. At that time, the two of them could use the Rui windmill to escape millions of miles away. Their breaths froze for a moment as they stared at the changes in the battlefield, searching for the fleeting opportunity to break through. However, the two of them were slightly stunned. Before they could release their trump cards to attack, they heard 10 dull thud. The 10 corpse-loving dogs were burned to ashes at the same time. Everything happened so suddenly that the necrophilia dog didn't even have time to let out a cry. As for the shock waves they released, they swept up their ashes and scattered them in all directions, completely hitting nothing but air. The air was filled with scattered bone ashes, but their bodies were not aware of it. The two of them stared at Su Yu as if they were looking at a ghost, and they were both horrified. After getting rid of the 10 corpse-loving dogs, Su Yu casually brandished his sword and put away the beauty under the moon. He cupped his fists at them and said, "Farewell." As he spoke, he turned around and prepared to leave. Only now did the two of them return to their senses. The young man's expression was now filled with deep reverence, or perhaps fear. He hurriedly said, "Thank you for your help, sir." Su Yu shook his head. "We are all from the Starry Tower, so it is natural for us to help each other. You don't have to be so polite. If there is nothing else, I will take my leave first." The woman's charming eyes turned as she stepped forward and bowed gracefully. Her voice was sweet and pleasant to the ears. "I am Lan Yu of the Maple Leaf Pavilion branch. May I know young master's great name?" Su Yu took a look at her and discovered that she was a pretty woman. She was dressed in a snow-white robe, and she had a dark golden phoenix hairpin on her head. Her brows were as delicate as the mountains, and her facial features were as gentle as spring water. She had a pair of eyes that could speak, as if they contained thousands of words. At first glance, she was like a beauty in the water, delicate and pitiful. Among all the women Su Yu had met, she would be among the top 10. Most men would be stunned by her beauty, but unfortunately, she had met Su Yu. Withdrawing his gaze, Su Yu's expression was indifferent as he said, "Shui Yu from the sword." He stopped abruptly, as Su Yu realized that the sword pavilion had made many enemies. He was alone, and it was best not to expose his origins. Seeing Su Yu's expression of fear halfway through his sentence, the two of them understood tacitly. The 100 Pavilions under cabinet master who were not very united. The two of them exchanged glances, secretly using secret soul techniques to communicate. "Ninth sister, there are only 2 pavilions with the word sword in them, right? One is the number 1 pavilion, the Sword Light Pavilion, and the other is the Sword Pavilion, which is located in a remote area. Which pavilion is Shui Yu from?" The woman named Ninth Sister laughed mockingly. "Are you teasing me, eighth brother? In a barren place like the Sword Pavilion, how could a pavilion branch cultivate a demon-like genius who could kill 10 level 1 Cavern World Venerables with a single sword strike?" Without a doubt, they assumed that Su Yu was from the famous Sword Light Pavilion. The Sword Light Pavilion was second to none in terms of talent recruitment and annual turnover. Even the second-ranked Heavenly Music Pavilion was far from comparable. It is said that in the past 100 years, the Sword Light Pavilion has cultivated 3-star-level geniuses. This time, they have brought all of them, ready to soar into the sky in the ancient dream altar. Ninth Sister said thoughtfully. "One of them has the surname Shui." Eighth Brother said meaningfully, "Ninth Sister, are you saying that he changed his name?" Ninth Sister nodded. "It is highly possible. The Sword Light Pavilion has never announced their specific information. It is normal for them to change their surnames." Looking at Shui Yu, who was alone, Eighth Brother believed Ninth Sister's words. If that was the case, the two of them thought of the same thing. They would soon participate in the ancient dream altar. It would be much safer to travel with such powerful people. "Brother Shui, are you going to the headquarters of the Star Pavilion? If you don't mind, how about sharing our Rui Wind chariot?" Ninth Sister asked with an obedient and friendly look. Eighth Brother said generously, "That's true. If Brother Shui thinks highly of us, please do us the honor of traveling with us." Su Yu was completely unfamiliar with this area. He had no idea where the so-called headquarters of the Star Pavilion was located. If they were willing to lead the way, it would be great. "That's too serious. Let's travel together and take care of each other." Su Yu smiled. The two of them smiled and took out the Rui Wind chariot. Ninth Sister was a little distressed, But if she could make friends with such strong people, what was the harm in sacrificing a little? Bringing little Jingyu with him, Su Yu stepped onto their Rui Wind chariot. The Rui Wind chariot looked simple on the outside, but its interior was a space cavern. Although it was not big, it was full of divine energy. It was an excellent place for training. Su Yu entered and chatted with them briefly. He learned that the Red Leaf Pavilion had encountered the ravages of the void on their way here. The difference was that they had encountered a more severe situation. Under the leadership of the Pavilion Branchmaster, they had all evacuated from the backup exit. Unexpectedly, they were unlucky enough to be transported to the lair of a pack of corpse-loving dogs. The result was obvious. A dozen of them were attacked by hundreds of corpse-loving dogs. Among them, there were 3 overlord corpse-loving dogs. What was more exaggerated was that one of them was about to become a silver overlord. Even the Pavilion Branchmaster had a hard time dealing with them. He could not take care of the others. Just like that, under the attack of the bloodthirsty dogs, they were separated. Eighth Brother and Jume fled to this place, and were caught up by the 10 corpse-loving dogs. Just as they were about to fall into a predicament, Su Yu happened to appear nearby. The aura of the jade token of the Deputy Pavilion Master on his body resonated with the aura of the Appraiser's jade tokens on the 2 of them. Thus, he pleaded for Su Yu's help. It's strange. This place is so close to the Star Pavilion. How could there be a lair of the corpse-loving dogs? Ninth Sister raised her delicate eyebrows. Eighth Brother's face was slightly grave. This is indeed strange. There are countless capable people in the headquarters. Did no one discover the existence of this pack of corpse-loving dogs? This matter needs to be reported to the headquarters, Eighth Brother said thoughtfully. The group chatted for a while. Su Yu learned that it would take them 3 or 4 days to reach the headquarters, so he ended the conversation and went to a valley in the windmill world alone. After setting up an enchantment around him, Su Yu could not help but re-examine himself. Ever since he had broken through to the Tao God level, he had not had the time to examine himself. Now, before entering the headquarters, it was necessary to examine himself carefully. First, on his chest, there was an additional mark of an oil lamp. That was the mark of the Tao God. It was because of this mark that he could create rules at any time for his own use. For example, just now, the power of the beauty under the moonlight combined with the dark night meteor thrust could not have reached such a level where one sword could kill 10 enemies. However, with the help of the sharpness rule, the power of that sword had increased tenfold. With my current divine power, it is equivalent to a level 3 cavern world senior. However, with the help of the power of the Tao God, I can fight evenly with the Bronze Overlord without the World Annihilation Plate, Su Yu analyzed. With such strength, it is more than enough to protect oneself in the Sword Pavilion territorial waters. However, it might not be the case in the ancient Dream Altar. Not only will the Heavens Pridelings of the Stellar Pavilion be participating, but also the super geniuses of the entire Sea of Constellations. If they are not careful, they will be doomed. And this was without considering the fact that he had to face a tribulation transcender alone. Hence, Su Yu could not delay in increasing his abilities. He took a deep breath, and the essence of boundless demonic swordsmanship automatically appeared in his mind. At the same time, he was multitasking. He took out a limestone slab and carved the words Heaven's Sun gazing at air on it. Ever since he broke through to the initial success stage of the soul-devouring realm, he seemed to have fallen into a bottleneck and was unable to take another step forward. He had thought of asking Yun Yazi for the reason. Unfortunately, he had helped Su Yu fight the sinful lady last time, and his soul had become thin. Now, he was recuperating in the divine blood of the divine Nine-Dragon Cauldron and could not respond to Su Yu's request. Holding the green stone slab in his hand, Su Yu studied it carefully. 3 days and 3 nights passed just like that. Big Brother Shui, we're almost there. A clear and bright voice came from outside the valley. Su Yu put down the green stone slab. He could not get rid of the doubt between his brows. According to what the green stone slab said, Su Yu did not lack the conditions to break through to the upper tier. But why had he not broken through that shackle yet? 3 days had passed. They should be arriving at the headquarters of the Stellar Pavilion soon, right? Putting away the green stone slab, Su Yu took out the beauty under the moon. A wisp of pitch-black sword light revolved on both sides of the sword, emitting an extremely awe-inspiring aura. It was as if millions of demonic creatures had gathered on the sword's body. It could intimidate the enemy even before it could harm them. With the essence of boundless demonic sword's legacy, each stroke was stronger than the one before. The demonic moon revolving style, the dark night meteor thrust, and the third stroke was the boundless demonic gate. According to the legacy's introduction, when this swordsmanship was fully performed, it could summon the demonic gate and destroy the demonic sword. Chapter 1644. However, as he looked outside the valley, Su Yu did not dare to try it. It would be bad if he caused too much of a commotion. Outside the valley, Lan Yu was as beautiful as a fairy in the clouds. The wind blew against her white veil, causing her hair to flutter. "Brother Shui, can you teach me sword techniques?" Lan Yu smiled shyly and affectionately. Su Yu had seen many people before, so he naturally understood Lan Yu's intentions. It seemed as if she had mistaken Su Yu's identity, thinking that he was a disciple of the sword cabinet with a bright future. Hence, she had used the opportunity to teach him sword techniques to get closer to him. Su Yu was not interested in her, but even if he was, how could he accept her kindness? "I'm sorry, but my sword techniques came from an old senior. If he had not agreed, I would not have been able to pass them on." Su Yu rejected her bluntly. Lan Yu secretly rebuked him. "What a fool! I don't care about your sword techniques." She rolled her eyes and said, "Why don't we have a spar? After witnessing the power of Brother Shui's sword techniques, I have gained some enlightenment. Could you spar with me and give me some pointers?" "Me too. Me too." Little Jingyu looked at Lan Yu, then at Su Yu, then jumped and clapped happily. Su Yu gently looked at little Jingyu and said, "Fine, but we will not overdo it." With a flick of his wrist, the beauty under the moonlight fell into his palm. Lan Yu took out an azure long sword embroidered with runes, which matched her temperament. She, who held the blue sword in her hand, was like a fairy wielding a sword, walking through the mortal world. Water Moon Cloud Technique. The long sword in Lan Yu's hand rippled with layers of illusions. It was like the clouds in the water, or the mist in the moon. She was clearly using her sword, but she could not lock onto the shape of the sword. Su Yu's expression was calm as he lightly waved his sword. Demon Moon Revolving Technique. A crescent-shaped sword energy swept over in a simple yet violent manner. Ding, ding, ding. Su Yu's wrist suddenly twisted, and the beauty under the moonlight accurately pointed at the place where the sound had come from. Ding. A melodious voice rang out. The beauty under the moonlight accurately blocked the tip of an azure sword without missing a single inch. Lan Yu praised, "Great swordsmanship." Her heart was filled with admiration as she thought to herself, as expected of one of the 3 most outstanding disciples of the sword light branch. His sword skills are even more exquisite than our pavilion masters. Unbelievable! However, the ripples in her eyes grew brighter and brighter. With such potential, he will definitely become a member of the Star Pavilion in the future. If I can become his... Thinking to this point, Lan Yu suddenly had an idea, and the sword in her hand suddenly shook. The tip of the sword avoided the beauty under the moonlight and pierced toward Su Yu. Her expression changed as she shouted, "Brother Shui, get out of the way!" However, since they were so close to each other, how could Su Yu be worried that the other party would suddenly make a mistake? Just as the tip of the sword was about to pierce Su Yu's shoulder blade, Lan Yu raised her wrist at the critical moment, and the azure long sword pierced through Su Yu's armpit. However, Lan Yu's momentum did not slow down, and she plunged into Su Yu's embrace. Her soft body, which carried a sweet fragrance, pounced into Su Yu's embrace. Su Yu suddenly felt two shockingly soft lumps on his chest, as well as the hot and delicate body. For a moment, he could not help but feel restless. "Brother Shui, I'm sorry, I almost hurt you." Lan Yu, who was in his embrace, got up in a flustered manner and lowered her head apologetically. She had no intention of leaving Su Yu's embrace. Her face was flushed, and she looked like a ripe apple, waiting to be plucked at any time. Su Yu's eyes were clear, and he bit the tip of his tongue lightly. The pain made him quickly sober up, and he regained his senses. Without batting an eyelid, Su Yu took out the azure long sword from his armpit and returned it to Lan Yu. He calmly said, "I'm fine." Lan Yu's face was flushed. She turned around and said, "Brother Shui, don't tell anyone about what happened today. I have never thrown myself into someone's embrace." Her words were not false. Lan Yu had always maintained her beauty, and she would not easily give in to her pursuers. She wanted to maintain a pure and clean image. For many years, no one had touched her. It was the first time that she had thrown herself into his embrace. Su Yu smiled indifferently, and he watched her leave. "Humph!" A childish, displeased voice drifted into Su Yu's ears. Su Yu tilted his head and saw that it was little Jingyu, who was looking at him with her arms crossed. She said, "Humph! I don't like you anymore." Su Yu squatted down and stroked her head. He asked, "Why?" "I don't know." Little Jingyu pouted. "Anyway, I don't like it when you get close to other girls." Su Yu smiled as he looked at her mischievous look. It turned out that the quiet, fairy-like Xia Jingyu had also been mischievous when she was a young girl. "Then, what do you want to do to forgive me?" Su Yu asked with a smile. Little Jingyu thought about it for a moment, then pointed at herself, then at Su Yu. "I want to do what I did just now and throw myself into your embrace." Su Yu smiled, then stood up and opened his arms. "Come on." Little Jingyu smiled brightly, then threw herself into Su Yu's embrace. In the end, little Jingyu only reached Su Yu's waist. She raised her head gloomily and said, "It's not like that. Let's do it again." Outside the valley, a warm atmosphere filled the air. Half a day later, the space of the windmill world shook, and Su Yu left with little Jingyu. Looking from outside, the windmill world was full of cracks. It had reached its limit and was about to be scrapped. Fortunately, they were almost at the headquarters of the Starry Cabinet. From afar, they could see 9 humongous stars hanging in the sky, emitting a dazzling brilliance. "Brother Shui, let me accompany you to the star that belongs to the Sword Brilliance Cabinet." Lan Yu's eyes were filled with shyness, and she naturally stood close to Su Yu. Mina saw this, and a worried look appeared on its face. He had agreed to befriend Shui Yu, but Lan Yu's friendship might cause him some trouble. There were more than 1 or 2 admirers of Lan Yu in the Red Leaf Cabinet, and one of them was even the Deputy Cabinet Master. That kind of status was not something Shui Yu could compare with. If they really fought, Shui Yu would definitely be at a disadvantage. He did not want to distance himself from Shui Yu because of this. "No, Miss Lan, you go first." Su Yu smiled. Lan Yu wanted to accompany him, but after thinking about it, Shui Yu was a loner, so the Sword Brilliance Cabinet must have something to ask of him. If she did not even have the ability to discern this, Shui Yu would probably be displeased. "All right, when our cabinet is done, I will personally go to the Sword Brilliance Cabinet to look for you." Lan Yu cast a sparkling look at him, and then ran away shyly. The 8th brother bowed to Su Yu in awe. "I will take my leave first." The two left together, walking towards the orange-red star. Coincidentally, when they entered, a group of young heroes in gorgeous clothes strolled out leisurely. Their cultivation was not ordinary, and the weakest among them was a level 3 Cavern World senior. The strongest was the young man with the thunderbolt mark on his face. He was quite handsome, and his eyes were filled with natural arrogance. When the two met, they stopped for a moment. The young man with the thunderbolt led his entourage forward and greeted them politely. Miss Lon and Brother Yuan from the Red Leaf Cabinet. Lon Yu looked at him indifferently. Who are you? The young man with the thunderbolt was slightly embarrassed, but he did not dare to get angry. Instead, he smiled apologetically. Miss Lon, you are forgetful. I am Zhao Zhiling from the Yinchuan Cabinet. Lon Yu searched his name in her mind and shook her head coldly. Sorry, I don't know you. Goodbye. When she finished speaking, she soared into the sky. The eighth brother looked straight ahead, as if he did not care about the Yinchuan Cabinet at all. After the two left, the handsome young man stared at their back. His muscles twitched slightly as he snorted coldly. What's so great about them? Aren't they just from the Red Leaf Cabinet? An entourage next to them stared at their backs and said, Lon Yu, Yuan Yungang is one of the 9 strongest disciples of the Red Leaf Cabinet this year. Their abilities are much stronger than yours. You'd better find a way to get close to them. If you can get their care in the ancient dream altar, it will be much better. The handsome young man looked unconvinced, but his lips twitched a few times and he swallowed his words. Indeed, they could only curry favor with the Red Leaf Cabinet. Before long, Su Yu arrived at the Red Star where Cabinet Master Hu was. It was easy to find where Cabinet Master Hu was. With a sweep of his divine consciousness, he found an exaggerated number of strong men gathered somewhere. How many Cabinet Masters have come from the Star Pavilion this time? Su Yu was amazed. With a sweep of his divine telekinesis, he was able to detect at least 50 Overlord-class experts. Although most of them were bronze overlords, the sheer number was enough to surprise Su Yu. He had never seen so many overlords. Strange, wasn't it said that only the Sword Pavilion branch was invited to participate in the ancient dream altar? Why did the other pavilions arrive one after another? Could it be that there are other major events to be announced other than the ancient dream altar? So much so that Cabinet Master Hu has gathered all the pavilions under his jurisdiction? With doubts in his mind, Su Yu stepped into the area. As soon as he entered, he immediately sensed Mu Tsanghai and Yen Changhong's auras. However, for some unknown reason, it was as if their senses had been blocked, and they did not detect Su Yu's presence. Who are you? This was a courtyard with a lot of artificial mountains. Many young men of different ages each occupied an artificial mountain. In the courtyard, the cabinet masters of the various regions stood in a row. They faced the courtyard respectfully toward a cottage that emitted the fragrance of elixirs. Their expressions were respectful, not daring to show the slightest hint of disobedience. It was as if there was a great person in that cottage who held the life and death of this group of overlords in his hands. Su Yu's arrival naturally alarmed the young men in the artificial mountains. One of them frowned and asked about Su Yu's origin. Su Yu said, "Shui Yu from the Sword Pavilion branch." As he spoke, he scanned the various cabinet masters in the courtyard, but did not find any trace of Mu Tsanghai and Yen Changhong. "Haha, then you are late." The young man glanced at Su Yu and laughed. Su Yu couldn't care less about his sarcastic tone, and he asked, "May I ask the reason for this?" The young man said, "Why else? I did not do my job well, and lost someone important to Cabinet Master Hu. I was reprimanded alone." The person who had lost was undoubtedly Su Yu. He did not expect to inadvertently cause trouble for Mu Tsanghai. He could not help but feel ashamed. However, if it was just a reprimand, it was not a big deal. "I see," Su Yu said softly. The young man looked at Su Yu strangely. "Are you really from the Sword Pavilion branch? Your cabinet master and deputy cabinet master are about to be removed from their positions as cabinet masters, and you still have an expression of indifference? What? Removed from their positions? Isn't this a reprimand?" Su Yu said in surprise. The young man mocked. That as if the Sword Pavilion branch master did not make a mistake. Back then, she was the cabinet master that cabinet master who valued the most. In the end, she made a huge mistake and was demoted to the Sword Pavilion's sea region. Now that she has made another mistake, the reprimand is equivalent to removing her from her position. Made a huge mistake back then? Although Suyu was surprised, he knew it was not the time to look into it. Chapter 1645. Inside the thatched hut, the pill chi was like clouds, and the humid air was filled with a sweet fragrance. Behind a purple-gold bamboo curtain, a slightly plump middle-aged man in luxurious clothes could be vaguely seen, carefully concocting a pill recipe. Outside the bamboo curtain, 3 people stood side by side. Among them were Mu Tsunghai and Yen Changhong. There was also a stout old man with a pair of pupils that emitted dangerous arcs. The thatched hut was silent for a long time. Only the faint movements of the chubby middle-aged man could be heard. But Mu Tsunghai and Yen Changhong felt stifled, as if they were being tortured in silence. Sigh. The chubby middle-aged man finished concocting an elixir formula, put down the elixir formula in his hand, and sighed softly. Forget it, this is the will of the heavens. The leaping space mystic cave suddenly became chaotic, and even if Pavilion Master was there, he wouldn't be able to help. It's already good enough that Pavilion Master Mu came back safely. You can't be blamed for this. Pavilion Master. The eyes of the stout old man flickered. He took half a step forward and cupped his hand. 30,000 years ago, Pavilion Master Mu caused the heavenly stem star tribulation, causing the deaths of many important members of the Star Pavilion. She was sent to the Sword Pavilion branch to reflect on her mistake. Now that she has caused trouble again, if we let her off easily, how can we face our dead colleagues? The heavenly stem star tribulation was a tragedy that happened in the Star Pavilion 30,000 years ago. It was the Great Beginning Realm's Gregorian calendar, the heavenly stem year. An ancient star streaked across the sky of the Great Beginning Realm and fell into the constellation Sea. At that time, Mu Tsunghai was one of the 9 pavilion masters of the Star Pavilion. She and the other pavilion masters were all alarmed and joined forces to go to the place where the ancient star fell to investigate. Who would have thought that the ancient star was hiding a mystery? Several pavilion heads successively fell into it. Mu Tsunghai was no exception. Their cultivation bases and god blood had been assimilated by Gu Xing and made them his. Several pavilion masters were killed on the spot. Mu Tsunghai was afraid of death. At the critical moment, he killed the other pavilion leaders and used their divine blood to execute the forbidden technique of the Star Pavilion to escape. Of the 8 pavilion masters who went together, 7 died, and only Mu Tsunghai managed to escape. This matter shocked the Star Pavilion. They had never suffered such a huge loss before. The 3 pavilion masters came out and personally searched Mu Tsunghai's soul. When they discovered Mu Tsunghai's pathetic state, they were furious. A pavilion venerable attacked on the spot and killed Mu Tsunghai. However, one of the pavilion masters saved her life on account of Mu Tsunghai's great contributions to the Star Pavilion. However, the punishment was that he would be stripped of his position as pavilion master and sent to the savage sea domain. Although 30,000 years had passed, the shadow still lingered in the hearts of every Star Pavilion member who had experienced that era. They could not forget that after the death of the 7 pavilion masters, the Star Pavilion was in a precarious situation. There were endless internal disputes, external expansion was blocked, and blood was everywhere. It was all thanks to the 3 cabinet masters that the situation was stabilized and they gradually got through that difficult period. That event was known as the Heavenly Stem Star Tribulation. Some of the descendants of the Pavilion Masters who were buried in the Star Pavilion still remained in the Star Pavilion and became the Pavilion Branch Masters. Unfortunately, 3 of them were under the jurisdiction of Pavilion Master who, just like Mu Tsunghai. This included the middle-aged man with dual pupils, Inchuan Branch Pavilion Master, Zhao Fu. Hearing this, Mu Tsunghai opened his mouth but did not say a word. Yen Changhong glared at him and said, "Pavilion Master Zhao, Many years have passed and the 3 pavilion masters have forgiven us. Why are you still pestering them? Zhao Fu sneered coldly. What a joke! You might as well ask the old people in the Star Pavilion if they have forgiven her. You're abusing your position to take revenge, Yan Changhong said in disgust. Haha, you, Mu Songhai, are not doing your job well, and you still want others to take revenge? Zhao Fu smiled coldly. I'm thinking that when the Mystic Leaping Cave was in chaos, you wouldn't have played the same trick again and sacrificed the Deputy Pavilion Master to prolong your pathetic life, would you? How dare you? Yan Changhong had always respected Mu Songhai and would not allow others to slander him. The people we sent are still searching everywhere. How can it be so easy to determine that he is dead, let alone slandering the Pavilion Master? Zhao Fu sneered and did not say anything. His disdainful eyes seemed to be saying that Mu Songhai had a criminal record. What was so impossible about this? Enough. An exhausted shout was heard. It was Pavilion Master Hu. He rubbed his eyebrows and asked Zhao Fu, have you searched the alternate exit of the Mystic Leaping Cave and the possible teleportation place? Zhao Fu said, Pavilion Master, we have searched them all. As such, the chances of Xueyu dying in the Mystic Leaping Cave were very high. Yan Changhong said, Sir, the Pavilion Masters being searched are most likely related to Pavilion Master Zhao. Among them is even his biological brother, Zhao Zhiling. May I ask if Sir can be at ease with such a search? Zhao Fu's eyes narrowed. Little girl, are you saying that I used my personal convenience to disrupt the search for Xueyu? Yan Changhong laughed coldly. You know very well. Zhao Fu released a threatening aura and stared at Yan Changhong. You can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. If Deputy Pavilion Master Yan spouts any more nonsense, don't blame me for cleaning up Mu Songhai's mess. In fact, Zhao Fu had not only secretly instructed his acquaintances to slow down the search for Su Yu, he had also secretly instructed his brother, Zhao Zhiling, to kill Su Yu if he had the confidence to do so. Everything he had done was to make Mu Songhai's crime a reality. Yan Changhong glared at him furiously but did not dare continue. Zhao Fu's abilities were ranked first among the Pavilion Masters under Pavilion Master Hu's jurisdiction. Mu Songhai's current abilities were not up to par. If they really fought, they would be the ones at a disadvantage. She was furious at Zhao Fu's treachery and furious at Xueyu. What a piece of trash. He's still causing us trouble even after he's dead. Yan Changhong vented her anger on Su Yu, thinking to herself, joining our Pavilion Master has caused us a lot of trouble. Thinking about how Pavilion Master Mu had traveled hundreds of millions of miles to Twin Star Island to rescue him, Yan Changhong was even more displeased. Isn't it just a little bit of talent in the language of the foreign tribes? Her talent for cultivation is practically zero. Such a person, no matter how much we nurture her, will not be able to withstand the pressure of time. Sooner or later, she will be nothing but dust. If I had known this would happen, I would have tried my best to dissuade Pavilion Master from recruiting her. Zhao Fu cupped his hands and raised his voice. Pavilion Master Hu, perhaps you have not been in the Starry Pavilion for long and do not know the Starry Pavilion's hatred for Mu Songhai. If Pavilion Master Hu's punishment is unfair, I think not only will I not agree to it, but the descendants of the Pavilion Master will also not agree to it. Even the 3 Pavilion Masters will not agree to it. There was a hint of threat in his words. After all, he was the Pavilion Master's descendant and had deep connections in the Starry Pavilion. He was not completely afraid of Pavilion Master Hu. Pavilion Master Hu stared deeply at Zhao Fu. No one knew what he was thinking. Forget it. Mu Songhai sighed. He shook his head. Since it has come to this, I will not explain too much. I am willing to accept the punishment. Pavilion Master Hu, you do not have to lose faith in the Starry Pavilion because of this. Zhao Fu was delighted when he heard that. He chuckled. What? You finally admit that you killed the deputy pavilion master, just like how you mercilessly killed your colleagues in order to save your worthless life? Mu Songhai remained silent as if he had accepted his fate. Only Yen Chonghong was anxious, hateful, and resentful. How she wished that Shui Yu had never appeared. Otherwise, how could the pavilion master, who had lived in seclusion for so many years, be caught by the enemy branch and attacked without restraint? At this moment, at the door of the thatched hut, an alchemy boy guarding the door hurriedly ran in and sent a voice transmission to Pavilion Master Hu. Pavilion Master Hu's solemn expression gradually eased. Then, he became indifferent. Pavilion Master Mu, please go back. You did not do anything wrong this time. You do not need to be punished, Pavilion Master Hu said. Mu Songhai was stunned. Did not do anything wrong? Pavilion Master's decision just now was to bypass her once. In other words, he was implying that she was guilty but was forgiven. Why did the alchemy boy's words contradict the Pavilion Master's decision? Zhao Fu was also stunned. He said in a deep voice, Pavilion Master, please make a decision carefully. Mu Songhai killed his subordinate. It is intolerable. How can we easily? Pavilion Master Zhao. Pavilion Master Hu stared at him indifferently. As you said, you can eat whatever you want, but how can you say whatever you want? That Shui Yu was clearly waiting outside. Why are you so sure that he was killed? What? Not only Pavilion Master Zhao, but Mu Songhai was also shocked. Pavilion Master Hu smiled. Pavilion Master Mu, please go. I believe you have a lot to say to each other. Mu Songhai was relieved. He said, Pavilion Master, you personally picked this person. Why don't you invite him in to meet you? Although I picked him, it was Pavilion Master Mu's decision to bring him into the branch. You should train him well, Pavilion Master Hu said sincerely. He wanted to lend a helping hand to the demoted Mu Songhai. Understanding his meaning, Mu Songhai bowed gratefully and left. How could Zhao Fu accept such an ending? He stepped out of the thatched hut angrily and saw Mu Songhai, Yen Chonghong, and a young man talking. The young man looked exactly like the missing Shui Yu. Are you Shui Yu? Zhao Fu stepped forward and asked. He looked like he was interrogating a subordinate. Su Yu glanced at him and continued talking with Mu Songhai as if there was no one else around. He described in detail what happened after the leaping space mysterious cave, but of course, he deliberately left out some parts. Being ignored, Zhao Fu laughed angrily. Who do you think you are? How dare you ignore me? Su Yu raised his eyebrows and said, Pavilion Master, do you hear something howling? Mu Songhai chuckled. Maybe it's a dog howling from somewhere. Don't mind it. Let's find a place to talk. Hee hee. Yen Chonghong giggled, feeling elated. Everyone who noticed this scene was extremely astounded. Newborn calves are not afraid of tigers. A deputy pavilion master dares to treat the pavilion master of Yin Chuan's branch like this. He's digging his own grave. Isn't that right? Who is Zhao Fu? Although he is no longer as glorious as he was in the past, his connections are still there. It's a piece of cake for him to deal with Shui Yu. Zhao Fu waved his hand and left. He walked to the base of Yin Chuan's branch, his face gloomy. After a moment of silence, he said, Zhiling, how's the recovery of the thief you rescued a year ago? Zhao Zhiling said. He recovered a few months ago, and under the nurturing of our branch, his cultivation has broken through to the level of Cave World Senior. Then, have you controlled him? Zhao Fu's eyes flashed. Zhao Zhiling laughed evilly. Don't worry, he has been taking the Wuxin death powder for 49 consecutive days. Unless he wants to die, he will have to work for us obediently. Zhao Fu was relieved. He said coldly, All right, tell him that it's time for him to come in handy. Father, please say it. Zhao Zhiling said evilly. Zhao Fu laughed coldly. It's very simple. I have a way to make Mu Songhai and Shui Yu perish eternally. He transmitted his voice and told him the specific method. Chapter 1646. Zhao Fu stroked his beard, coldly grunting. There's no rush. That method needs to be used at the most appropriate time, not later or earlier. What do we do now? Do we just let them wander around in front of us? Zhao Zhiling said resentfully. If not for Mu Songhai, would our Zhao family have fallen to the level of a mere pavilion master? Mu Songhai, that coward, is only willing to show himself after the headquarters has gathered all the pavilions. I cannot tolerate her doing just fine. Zhao Fu's eyes were filled with a sinister sneer. Doing just fine? Haha, that's only if I agree. Hearing this, Zhao Zhiling knew that his father was prepared and let out a knowing smile. This star had 101 districts. The central district was where the pavilion masters were. The other 100 districts were for the various pavilion masters, specially built for them to stay at the headquarters. Mu Songhai led them to the Sword Pavilion Branch District. As he flew over, Su Yu suddenly felt many fierce gazes on him. There was a bit of hostility in their gazes. Su Yu was slightly surprised. According to Mu Songhai, she had only offended a few people. Looking at the situation before him, it did not seem as simple as one or two. Pavilion Master, why? Su Yu looked down at a pavilion master who was glaring at them, his eyes revealing an inquisitive expression. Mu Songhai sighed, finding it difficult to speak. Deputy Pavilion Master Shui, don't ask what you shouldn't ask. Yan Changhong stared at Su Yu with dissatisfaction. Sensing Yan Changhong's hostility, Su Yu shrugged his shoulders, not taking it to heart. Su Yu was well aware of the reason for her hostility. It was probably jealousy. Yan Changhong grunted, raised her snow-white neck, and turned her head in disdain. At this moment, a coarse, cold laugh came from below. Mu Songhai, you still have the face to show yourself? Below them, on a bustling palace, stood an old man dressed in leopard skin. He had long gray hair, and there was a blood mark between his brows. His eyes were like a tiger's, exceptionally fierce. Yan Changhong looked down, her expression changing. She exclaimed in a low voice, Yishin? What bad luck to bump into this guy. Su Yu's heart stirred. Mu Songhai had once said that there was a person called Yishin in the opposing pavilion branch. From the looks of it now, there was no doubt that it was him. Yishin's cultivation was terrifying. Su Yu stared at him for a while, and he couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine. The feeling was like a mortal facing a wild wolf. Of all the pavilion masters he had met along the way, this person was probably second only to Zhao Fu. However, it was said that Yishin's background was 10 times stronger than Zhao Fu's. In terms of threat, Wild God far surpassed Zhao Fu. Mu Songhai stopped and said calmly, What's the matter? Inoshin stared at her with hatred. He clenched his teeth and sneered. Don't worry. However, do not fly over our pavilion's territory. In the headquarters of the Star Pavilion, no one dared to have a private fight. Yan Changhong said angrily, You didn't open up this place, why can't I fly over it? Don't go too far. Scram! How can a junior like you interrupt when this pavilion is speaking? Wild God shouted coldly. His voice was filled with savagery, and it had the magical effect of intimidating people. Instantly, Yan Changhong's heart palpitated inexplicably and panicked. Her limbs trembled, her lips trembled, and her eyes revealed a natural fear. The onlookers nearby could not help but laugh coldly. Hee, there's going to be a good show. Mu Songhai killed Yishin's elder brother back then. He had threatened many times that he would personally take Mu Songhai's head to pay tribute to his elder brother. I really can't understand why someone would follow Mu Songhai, that bastard. Hey, what's so strange about that? What kind of powerful people would be willing to follow her? Didn't you see that when Wild God roared, the 2 people who followed him immediately turned into turtles? Hee, too good for nothings. No wonder they were willing to follow Mu Songhai. The harsh words fell into Yan Changhong's ears. She felt humiliated and angry, but her body could not help but feel terrified. She could not refute them. "Excuse me, Pavilion Master Yishin, have you been promoted to Pavilion Master?" Unexpectedly, Su Yu, who had been silent all this while, suddenly spoke. His expression was calm. Not only did he not panic, but he was also unusually quiet. Wild God was secretly surprised. His roar just now could only be resisted by the silver overlord of the same generation. That kid was merely a level 3 Cavern World senior. How could he have the ability to resist his roar? However, he did not dare to admit that he was the Pavilion Master. He sneered, "Kid, you have ulterior motives." Su Yu said indifferently, "So, you are not the Pavilion Master?" "Nonsense. Our Pavilion Master is only Lord Hu. Don't you dare mislead us with your lies." His words were interrupted by Su Yu. "Then why are you being so long-winded?" Wild God was startled, but Su Yu did not give him a chance to refute. "If you are not the Pavilion Master, then who gave you the right to forbid us from passing through this airspace? Or rather, who do you think you are? Who can make decisions in Pavilion Master whose territory?" His rebuttal made Wild God laugh in anger. No one likes to listen to your nonsense," Su Yu said indifferently. He took a step forward, his eyes filled with deep disdain for Wild God. Mu Songhai was startled. He sighed and walked over with an indifferent look on his face. Yen Chonghong was still panicking. With Mu Songhai's help, she barely crossed the airspace. When they landed in the area of the Sword Pavilion, Yen Chonghong's panic disappeared. She patted her chest to calm herself down. Her gaze fell on Su Yu, who was sitting casually, and she could not help but feel ashamed. Especially when she recalled how pathetic she had been in front of Wild God, she felt even more ashamed. She clenched her teeth, stomped her feet, and entered the room with a sullen air. Mu Songhai looked at Su Yu seriously. He muttered to himself for a long time, "Shui Yu, come to my room, I have something to tell you." Su Yu nodded. Inside the room, Mu Songhai said, "Do you want to know why so many Pavilion Masters of the Star Pavilion are hostile to me?" Su Yu thought for a moment, then said, "Yes, but if Pavilion Master has something that is difficult to say, you do not have to say it. If you want to know, it is my fault for hiding it from you until now. Now that things have come to this, I can no longer hide it from you," Mu Songhai said slowly. Then, she began to talk to herself, recounting the events of the past. After learning about the Heavenly Stem's starry disaster, Su Yu was shocked. 7 Pavilion Masters had fallen 30,000 years ago? The abilities of each Pavilion Master were usually close to the Martial Emperor level. And there were 7 of them. The Star Pavilion of today was already so powerful that it was unsettling. What kind of terrifying colossus would it have been when it was at its peak? However, when Mu Songhai recounted that she had sacrificed 7 Pavilion Masters to escape with her life, the atmosphere suddenly became strange. Mu Songhai looked straight at Su Yu, saying, "After hearing this, do you have anything to say?" Su Yu said without hesitation, "With the character of the Pavilion Master, it is indeed despicable." A bitter smile appeared on Mu Songhai's lips, but Su Yu said, "However, there is no perfect person in this world. To judge a person's good or evil, it is not a moment, but a lifetime." After a long time, Mu Songhai's old face showed a hint of relief. "A lifetime? Haha." She looked deeply at Su Yu, her eyes flickering with an unknown meaning. "After a long time," she said, "you should rest first. Tomorrow night, the Deputy Pavilion Master has invited all the Pavilion Masters to a banquet. You have to go." Su Yu could tell from Mu Songhai's words that the banquet would not be easy. Nodding, Su Yu said, "I understand. Wait." Mu Songhai called out to Su Yu, hesitation flashing across her face. She then took out a thumb-sized grayish-black stone from her sleeve. Its surface was smooth and delicate, and its material was similar to graphite. But it glowed with a faint crystal light, like a type of crystal. It was the first time Su Yu had seen such a strange stone. What have you been trying to comprehend recently? Mu Songhai asked. Su Yu was immediately on guard. Recently, he had indeed been trying to comprehend the heavens sun gazing at air, but he was stuck at this level and had no clue. But how did Mu Songhai know? I see that your eyebrows are like silk and your whole body is shrouded in a hazy aura. You must have encountered a bottleneck in comprehending some powerful divine technique. Mu Songhai's seemingly turbid eyes were like fiery eyes that could see through the world, penetrating Su Yu's heart. Su Yu was secretly surprised. Mu Songhai was indeed worthy of being one of the 9 great pavilion masters. Although her cultivation was far from what it had been in the past because of her injuries, her vision had not regressed. Thank you for your concern, Pavilion Master. Recently, I have indeed had some difficulties in comprehending. Su Yu sighed. Mu Songhai handed over the grayish-black stone. Grind this into powder and mix it into a medicinal soup. Soak in it. It will be extremely beneficial for comprehension. Su Yu's heart was unmoved. Comprehending the path of divine techniques, the most important thing was talent, followed by time. He had never heard of an external object that could aid in the comprehension of divine technique. But out of courtesy, Su Yu still accepted it and thanked him. As if he had seen through Su Yu's thoughts, Mu Songhai laughed lightly. The great beginning realm is filled with all sorts of strange things. Since the dragon marrow can aid in the comprehension of the divine path, how do you know that there is nothing in this world that can aid in the comprehension of divine technique? Su Yu could not help but look at the grayish-black stone again. The dragon marrow could aid in the comprehension of divine techniques because the divine dragon innately grasped the great path and was the closest to the various divine paths. Its spinal cord gathered the essence of the divine dragon and could naturally aid in the comprehension of the divine path. As for divine techniques, what in this world contained the essence of divine techniques? But Mu Songhai's words stirred Su Yu's heart. She must not have said this without thinking. Thank you, Pavilion Master, for your kindness. Su Yu bid farewell to her and returned to his room. Filled with curiosity, Su Yu immediately fetched a huge wooden bucket and filled it with rootless water. Then, he threw the grayish-black stone into the bucket. An unexpected scene occurred. The seemingly ordinary stone, after being thrown into the bucket, was like water or boiling oil. Crackle! The entire bucket of water boiled violently and continued to tumble, splashing waves 3 to 4 feet high. The water also quickly turned from a clear state to a grayish-black viscous state. A pungent, burning smell rose from the wooden bucket into the sky. It was extremely pungent. Staring at the wooden bucket, the corners of Su Yu's mouth twitched. Chapter 1647. What was that stone? A piece the size of a thumb could be used to make a whole barrel of paste. After hesitating for a moment, Su Yu took off his clothes and jumped into the barrel. As soon as he entered, Su Yu almost jumped up in shock, crying out in pain, "What are these things?" In his perception, this barrel was not a sticky substance, it was clearly a barrel of lava. Even though he had a strong resistance to pain, he could not recognize the source of the pain. The burning pain did not lessen as his body adapted. Instead, the sticky substance entered his skin through his hair follicles, causing intense burning pain under his skin. At this moment, Su Yu doubted Mu Songhai's intentions. But Su Yu maintained his rationality, forcing himself to endure the burning pain. Finally, after enduring for 10 breaths, when Su Yu felt that his body was about to turn into ashes and his consciousness was about to collapse, a strange cool feeling came from under his skin. It was the sticky substance that had seeped in. After fusing with the blood, it gave birth to a strange cool feeling. The feeling spread from under his skin to his limbs and bones, making Su Yu's entire body feel clear and comfortable. It was as if he had eaten 10,000 ginseng fruit. After the excruciating pain, it was paradise. If he had to describe this feeling, there was only one word: putting oneself on the edge of death to survive. Su Yu's mind had an epiphany. Destruction before establishment. Destruction before establishment. He immediately tried to comprehend the heavens sun-gazing at air technique, and was surprised to find that the confusion he had felt before were gone. With the help of the cool feeling of life after death, Su Yu found that it was much easier to comprehend. It was as if he could comprehend the shackles in the next moment. But the cool feeling disappeared as quickly as it came. The effect of the sticky substance had worn off. If he wanted to experience it again, he would have to endure the torment of 2 levels of heaven again. But for Su Yu, who had tasted the sweetness, what was the pain? As long as he could comprehend the soul-devouring realm, everything would be worth it. Hiss! Su Yu, who had started again, fell into a burning pain that made him wish he was dead. What followed was a sudden cooling sensation. The collision of the 2 extreme sensations created endless possibilities for Su Yu's comprehension. Time passed bit by bit. Su Yu grasped every second to comprehend. Soul-devouring. Soul-devouring. Finally, after experiencing hundreds and thousands of cycles of pain and pleasure, he vaguely caught a thread of inspiration. It was as if a star had suddenly appeared in the dark night sky. Although it was weak, the glimmer was particularly eye-catching. For someone who had been stuck in this realm for a long time, how precious was that inspiration that was hard to come by. Su Yu could not contain his excitement. He followed that thread of inspiration and continued to explore. As the comprehension grew clearer, the feeling of coming into contact with the essence and finding the true meaning became more and more obvious. His many years of experience told Su Yu that a breakthrough was just around the corner. According to the introduction of the heavens sun-gazing at air, great mastery of the soul-devouring realm could devour the divine souls of overlord-class beings. The book didn't specify what kind of overlord it was. Because of this, people were looking forward to it. If he could take this step, his progress in the Tao of the Soul would be close to Yunyazi's. The breakthrough was right in front of him, until a wild roar filled with deterrence directly rushed into his soul realm. The stars he was comprehending suddenly dimmed and disappeared into the darkness. Su Yu's pursuit of enlightenment came to an abrupt halt. The great sense of loss caused Su Yu's soul to tremble violently, and his mind was greatly impacted. He was in seclusion in the wooden barrel. His eyes were closed, and traces of milky white divine blood flowed from the corners of his eyes. When he opened his eyes, they were blood-red. Wah! Su Yu suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, which soaked a large part of his chest. When his enlightenment was about to break through the bottleneck, it was forcibly interrupted, and his soul was severely damaged. Even his body had symptoms of vomiting blood that did not match his soul. If Su Yu's soul had not reached the level 1 Cavern World Master level and barely stabilized his soul, just now, his soul would have left his body in the impact. He was a body that had been seized. If his soul left his body, it would be difficult to return. Almost by a hair's breadth, he had almost wasted all his previous efforts and lost everything he had worked hard for. Looking at the wooden barrel under him, the water was clear again, without any impurities, let alone sticky substances. The enlightenment could no longer continue. What was even more unfortunate was that he had endured the pain of hundreds and thousands of reincarnations before he finally caught a glimpse of the breakthrough inspiration. In the end, it was snuffed out by someone. He had already set up enchantments in the side room. Unless it was intentional, there would be no sound coming in at all. Someone had discovered that Su Yu was at a critical moment of meditation and deliberately disturbed him. And that wild roar, which was full of deterrence, could not have come from a second person. Wild deity! Su Yu rarely hated anyone. Even Jian Ruxiong, who had chased him to the ends of the earth, only wanted to kill him, not hate him. But wild deity! He wiped the divine blood from the corners of his mouth and eyes, and his eyes were cold and stern. Su Yu climbed out of the wooden barrel, feeling weak all over. It was the side effect of his soul almost leaving his body. As long as he rested for a while, his soul and body would be reunited, and the weakness would disappear automatically. He put on his clothes and came out of the side room. Mu Songhai and Yen Chonghong had already leaped out of the side room and were facing Wild Deity in the sky. Wild Deity had a provocative smile on his face. He had forcibly occupied their territory. When he noticed Su Yu's appearance, his lips curled into a beastly smile. Bastard, how does it feel? It must be very uncomfortable to have your enlightenment interrupted, right? Su Yu stared at him, suppressing the urge to attack. First, this was the headquarters of the Starry Pavilion. Whoever attacked first would die first. Second, his body was weak. Even if he attacked, he would only be humiliating himself. Third, the person behind Wild Deity had yet to appear. Mu Songhai rushed over to check on Su Yu's body. His face was filled with anger. Wild Deity, there must be a bottom line. You are a pavilion master, plotting against a deputy pavilion master's junior. Don't you think it's shameless? Wild Deity's nose was in the air. When this little bastard humiliated me in front of everyone, did he ever treat me as a senior? I interrupted his enlightenment to teach him a lesson. I want him to understand that in front of me, Wild Deity, he is nothing. Humph! Mu Songhai clenched his fists, his aura surging. It could be seen that she was truly furious. Wild Deity! Mu Songhai's tone was low and furious. You can bully me, but if you bully my people, I will not let you off. Her 10 fingers rotated, forming a seal. She could no longer hold back and chose to attack. Unfortunately, she did not realize that Wild Deity's lips were slightly curled up. It was a sinister smile that indicated his plot had succeeded. However, just as she was about to attack, Su Yu strode over and pressed down on her shoulder. A gust of power of law surged into Mu Songhai's body from his palm, quickly calming the surging divine energy. Mu Songhai looked at Su Yu in shock. The divine energy of a silver overlord was actually calmed by a cave world senior? His heart was in turmoil. The seemingly simple action made Mu Songhai feel as if he had seen the tip of the iceberg, and he was horrified. Pavilion Master, don't be fooled. Take a closer look around. Su Yu said in a low voice. Mu Songhai's attention was diverted. His gaze swept across the surroundings, and he was suddenly shocked. He laughed angrily. You are a disgrace to your elders. Which of the 7 great pavilion masters wasn't a hero? How could their descendants be so insignificant? Wild Deity's face stiffened, and he was extremely disappointed. He stared at Su Yu with extreme hatred. Little bastard, you have ruined my plan again. Do you think you have a long life? Cough, cough. Su Yu coughed up 2 mouthfuls of blood. He stared at him and said, at least longer than you. Destroying his enlightenment had almost caused his soul to scatter. He would not be a man if he did not take revenge. However, now was not the time. Haha, you are just a small ant? Why don't you measure yourself first? Wild Deity sneered. He turned around and waved his hand with his back facing Su Yu. Little bastard, we will meet tomorrow night. Prepare yourself. Tomorrow night will not be easy for you. Su Yu slowly closed his eyes, forcibly suppressing the overflowing murderous intent. He turned around wordlessly and silently walked towards his room. Mu Songhai chased after him. Let me heal your injuries first. No need. Su Yu did not even turn his head. You can't heal my injuries. I need some human blood. Mu Songhai was stunned. Did Su Yu mean to take revenge on Wild Deity? Her expression was a little complicated. Not far away, Wild Deity landed on the top of an ancient tree. More than 10 figures emerged from the surroundings and gathered around Wild God. Among them was Zhao Zhiling. He asked, Uncle Wild, that bastard Mu Songhai held back and did not attack? Wild Deity's face darkened. He clenched his right fist and punched the ancient tree below him. With a cracking sound, the ancient tree, which was made of extremely hard material, was smashed into pieces. It's all because of that little bastard Shui. He ruined my plans. Wild Deity's eyes were filled with fury. According to the plan, they would infuriate Mu Songhai and force him to attack. At the headquarters of the Star Pavilion, no one was allowed to fight for any reason. Anyone who violated the rules would be punished. It was conceivable that once Mu Songhai attacked, the 10 of them could use the rules to avenge their personal grudges. With Mu Songhai's abilities, it would be difficult for him to kill her, but it would be more than enough to injure her. Unfortunately, Su Yu restrained himself and forcefully stopped Mu Songhai. Zhao Zhiling was furious. It's him again. My father almost got Mu Songhai kicked out of the Star Pavilion. It was this kid who suddenly came back to disrupt the plan. Now, he is here to cause trouble. He is deliberately going against us. Wild Deity let out a cold grunt. That little bastard, I will not let him off at tomorrow night's banquet. In the room, Su Yu dragged his weak body back to the stone bed. He immediately began to recuperate. 1 day's time is enough for my soul and body to stabilize again. Su Yu checked carefully and heaved a sigh of relief. There was no problem with his body. Su Yu closed his eyes, hoping to find that thread of inspiration again. But after half a day, he had gained nothing. His comprehension of the soul-devouring realm had returned to a state of chaos. He had no idea where that thread of inspiration had gone. His comprehension had been completely interrupted. Su Yu was both regretful and angry. Wild Deity. Su Yu's eyes were fierce. So what if you are the pavilion master? I did not want to hurt you, so I deliberately tolerated it. In your eyes, I am just an ant that can be easily bullied. Composing himself, Su Yu coldly said, Tomorrow night's banquet, right? Fine, I will give you an unforgettable surprise. He closed his eyes and began to recuperate. He was waiting for tomorrow's banquet to begin.